Tomorrow, right? What time does it start? What time does it start?
6:30.
Is it at Madonna again?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you very much. We have a quorum. All 5 directors are here. I guess we jump right into item number 1. I have requests to speak. I'm going to go ahead and have those first before we have nominations for the different offices. So, speaking first will be Mary Mahler, followed by Crosby Schwartz.
Is this on? Is it working?
Did you hit the little
I don't know, it's green, but
the green? You're good.
you're good?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
Okay, we'll try this. So I wanted to speak today in support of Cindy Seidel for an officer position on the CCSD Board of Directors. I'm on the Finance Committee and also participated in several ad hoc Budget Committee meetings with Cindy. In addition, I've attended a number of these meetings and observed her full transparency and action as part of the board. So many of Cindy's attributes were acquired during her 30-plus years in the government contracting industries. Some of those qualities are project planning and management, risk analysis, direct and indirect budgeting, setting overhead rates, controlling costs, and competitive bid development. In addition to chairing CCSD committees, Cindy is an active member of the NCAC and the American Legion Auxiliary. Cindy's always well prepared for meetings, having obviously done her research on the subject matter. She's also has strong working knowledge of SLO County and CCSD codes and their operating models. And as a reminder, Cindy received the highest number of votes in the last election. Overall, Cindy's well qualified to be a CCSD officer and is well supported by many in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Crosby Schwartz, followed by Donald Archer.
Thank you, President Pearson, members of the board and staff. I know you all know each other, so there's probably not too much I can add here, but I'd like to make a comment in support of Vice President Farmer as your next president. As you know, Harry's been a long-time active member of the community. Seen directors come and go, staff come and go, seen residents come and go. So he has a really broad perspective on the community and the problems that it faces. He often expresses his love for the natural beauty of the area that we live in, but as you know, that's not his only area of expertise. He's well informed about the issues facing the board and the community. One thing where he's been especially successful is with his outreach to members of the community to give them every opportunity to ask questions, make comments. His monthly table talk meetings, which are open to members of the community, are an excellent example of maintaining good communications with everybody in the community. I think he'd be an excellent president. Thank you.
Thank you. Donald Archer, followed by Christine Heinrichs.
Thank you, President Pearson, Vice President Farmer, and members of the board and staff. I wanted to first say I truly appreciate the commitment all of you have made to this community as members of the board. It's no easy task, I know. I'm here today in support of Vice President Harry Farmer as this board's next president. I know Harry is shy about praise, so I hope I don't embarrass him. I have known Harry for nearly 3 decades. During this time, I have always been impressed by his commitment to positions he has felt to be in the best interest of this community, and by his integrity and moral commitment to what he believes is right. He has never wavered. Harry was a knowledgeable advocate for this community long before he came to the board. But when he became a director in 2016, I saw a public side of Harry I hadn't seen: a well-informed and effective public servant, and I was impressed. Harry has passionately represented the interests of those who love this community and who live here, and has been dedicated to preserving the delicate natural habitat that drew us to this special place. Besides being a member of the board, Harry has shown his love for this community by volunteering innumerable hours, making Cambria even better and more beautiful. Harry is informed and knowledgeable. He conscientiously does his homework. Harry has made listening to community members a priority, initiating his monthly table talks, among other things. Harry does not hesitate to stand up for what he strongly believes is in the best interest of the community. I have seen Harry continue to grow as he has served on this board, expanding his knowledge and point of view without diminishing his integrity. I know Harry has the best interests of the community at heart, and I believe his passion, his knowledge, his experience, his accessibility, and his character is great asset to the board as its president. Harry has put in his time, and now it's his time to serve in this position of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Heinrichs, followed by Tony Church.
Thank you. Ted Key was unable to be here today and requested that I read his statement into the record. Board members, it is with complete enthusiasm that I recommend Harry Farmer to serve as the next president. Harry has been one of the hardest working directors and has consistently been well versed in the issues that have come before you. Mr. Farmer's experience and dedication to our community is well known in our town. Harry has been accessible to our community with his monthly ongoing table talk breakfast meetings and completely transparent as a seasoned director. Harry's fiduciary focus has been exceptional in a district that needs it badly. He deserves to be seated as president because he has earned it. Ted's had the ongoing pleasure of working with Don Howell on the Policy Standing Committee. We started slowly, he says, but under Don's leadership, we've advanced a great deal of the work, some of which you will be addressing later in this meeting. Don is always well-versed in our tasks and cognizant of fairness in his leadership role. Like Harry, he is very cost-focused. I'm looking forward to more great leadership from Don and believe he would be a superb vice president. The many voices you hear today in support of these two directors will add and enhance mine. Please advance these directors today. Thank you for your attention. And let me say I endorse Vice President Farmer for president and Director Howell for vice president as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Church, followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Good afternoon, President Pearson and directors. My name is Tony Church, and I have been a property owner here in Cambria since 1992. I have had several interactions with the CCSD, and unfortunately, most have been very disappointing, to say the least. However, I now wish to congratulate you for the positive steps that you've taken in the past year, especially the setting up of the various committees and the more open format that has taken place. However, I believe that there is still room for improvement in the latter category. In order for this trend to be continued, I wish to express my recommendation that Mr. Farmer be appointed as the new president of the CCSD and that Mr. Don Howell be appointed as vice president. Harry deserves the recognition, and I believe that his willingness to engage and listen is essential for the continued progress that has been made in communication with both the public and the staff. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Elizabeth Bettenhausen, followed by Gordon Heinrichs.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The integrity of the Board of Directors of CCSD. The integrity of my technological ability is, that's a change. The integrity of the Board of Directors of CCSD lies in each and all of the directors speaking and acting forthrightly and honestly about your understanding of the issues before you. No matter how the differences at times loom beyond easy understanding for us members of the public, respect for all members of the board maintains the integrity of the process. Without respect, the community's trust in the board is eroded. Today, you, the Board of Directors, have the opportunity to acknowledge the important differences and elect Director Farmer to the office of President of the Board. Director Farmer focuses on economic and ecological responsibilities and knows they always interact with each other. If the economic and environmental responsibilities are kept apart, the consequences for the town of Cambria and its future are dangerous. Director Farmer's concern for maintaining and sustaining solid infrastructure persists, even when some of the facts are called opinions because he voices them. Director Farmer introduces feet-on-the-ground humor, for which I am infinitely grateful, and he introduces information about the town for the board's discussion, which is all too rare. Director Farmer knows a long history of trust and mistrust in Cambria and in the region, and brings it to bear on board's decisions. As president of the board of directors in times of conflict, which are inevitable, I hope, otherwise we'd be homogeneously dull. In times of conflict, his leadership will make solid discussion possible, for which we desperately hope, especially when strong disagreements arise. Director Farmer has shown that respecting the CCSD Board of Directors and staff depends on respecting the community first. Transparency depends on this respect, and the infrastructure of the whole environment of commerce, nonprofits, hospitality, education, etc., does too. I think electing Director Howell to the office of Vice President will build community respect and trust as well. Director Howell understands well, and I couldn't put this in bold more vocally, Director Howell understands well that perfectionism and public service do not blend well in a democracy. His freedom from ideological hard-footedness is refreshing. Director Howell listens to conflicting perspectives with the well-being of the whole community in mind. Therefore, I respectfully request you, as the Board of Directors of CCSD, to elect Director Farmer and Director Howell to the office of President and Vice President of your board, and I thank you very much for your serious consideration of my request.
Thank you. Gordon Heinrichs is the last one we have.
Hello, board and staff. This is Gordon Heinrichs, and I've been Cambria for about 10 years, and I've gone through a lot of board members and trials and tribulations these past years, and lately they've had an excellent opportunity of getting to know Harry Farmer quite well and his capabilities, and I found attending his table talks that he does an excellent job of listening to the community that show up and patiently try to answer those questions appropriately and honestly that best he can, and he tries for transparency in all that he does. So I'm recommending him for your consideration for president of the board at this time, along with my support for Don Howell as vice president, and that working with him on the policy committee has given me great support in his actions and capabilities of handling definitely good problems with the policies that are still facing us today that we need to work on. So I appreciate your votes in that manner.
Thank you. We have one more that was just turned in. Scott Anderson, I believe it is.
Hi, my name is Scott Anderson. I'm a one-year resident of Cambria, having moved down from San Jose just in time for the 2018 CCSD campaign. Immediately, it was made apparent to me the role that water plays in Cambria now and in its future. I then learned about the controversial backstory and recent water developments and witnessed the divisive effect it had on folks in town. I've spent a considerable amount of time since then trying to understand the history and facts in order to have a considered opinion of my own on the matter, which is how I came to meet Harry Farmer. I've spent many hours talking to Harry about Cambria when we found ourselves walking the hills, walking our dogs on the hills of I live on Lodge Hill and Harry lives on Lodge Hill. So bottom line, we spent a lot of time walking and talking. I've attended a half dozen table talks organized by Harry to hear the opinions of residents and to disseminate water-related information. I've watched his behavior and heard his opinions and recommendations from the dais. While I respect the volunteerism and service of all the directors, I actually also know Harry Farmer. I find his two primary qualifications, rock-solid integrity and an enduring, passionate love of Cambria, to be attributes that will serve this community well as it sorts out its water future. I believe his deliberative, inclusive style of leadership will help the community move forward thoughtfully with an eye to what it can afford and sustain. I think now is exactly the right time for Harry Farmer to lead the CCSD as president. I feel the same way about Don Howell. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I would now open nominations for the office of President of the Board. Director Rice?
First, before I make a nomination, I want to thank President Pearson for taking on the role of president without having been vice president first. As somebody who did the same, I can appreciate how difficult that is, and I was dealing with not having a GM change. So thank you so much for the hard work that you've done over the past year as president. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I think that this board and community would do well to return to something like an officer rotation that allows for a director to be vice president and then to be president, because as President Pearson and I both are aware, it can put you in deep water that you hopefully are not drowning in, and I don't think either of us managed to drown, fortunately. And I also think that it's important that we have a VP that isn't going to have to be up for election, and therefore, for example, if I were nominated VP, I'm up for election in November, so that means if I don't get reelected, if I don't run, then you're going to have the same situation where you have a president that wasn't VP first. So that's kind of, and having it go back to a more clear rotation is also helpful, because I think many of the comments that were made, there were some that were very specific to Director Farmer's service on this board, but almost all the rest of them could apply to each of us. And I think that the community trusted each of us enough to get enough votes to put us on here, so we all can take on the responsibilities that are part of the role of being a director. All of that said, Vice President Farmer provided me with an opportunity to be president in a very difficult time for this district and a difficult time for the board itself, because we were very divided. And I 100% welcomed him to the board when he was elected in 2016, because it gave me some relief from the 4-1 situation that I found myself in quite frequently. Not that we always agree, but that's a good thing, because it provides for better conversation and a more clear discussion, hopefully, for the community because when you do disagree and you have to come to a certain consensus, it's good to have that discussion so the public knows where you're coming from and your reasoning. One of the things I learned becoming president, it's not as important a role as one would think from the outside. And it is one of the, it's important for running the meetings, but you're still a member of a 5-person board that requires a majority consensus to move on anything. I'm not going to speak to the qualifications of any of the board members to be an officer in particular. I think the public has spoken strongly for Vice President Farmer, and I think that it's important that our board move forward in an orderly fashion, which means making the Vice President the President, and then following with that, deciding who we want to put it for Vice President to move forward next year. And with that, I would nominate Vice President Harry Farmer to be president next year, or today, as of
today.
our vote.
Yes. All right. Director Howell.
If the nomination needs a second, I would second that nomination, but also with great gratefulness at how you have conducted these meetings for the last year. And so,
Thank you.
much appreciation. Yeah.
Good. So we have a nomination and a second. Any discussion, further discussion? All right, we will take a roll call vote, please. Ms. Madrid?
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Farmer?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye. We have a new president. Congratulations, Harry.
Before we move forward to nominate and elect a vice president, I just want to thank everyone out there that spoke in a very supportive and encouraging fashion for me being president of this board. I feel totally humbled and grateful to have been serving on this board for the past 3 years. I want to also express my serious appreciation to former President David Pearson. He and I have had a very cordial and respectful relationship over the past year, and I've learned a lot by working with him. And I don't know what else to say except that I really respect David for not just how he's assisted me, but his service on this board for the last 2 years. I'll also make a couple more comments. This is, and I've made this remark before, I've lived here for 33 years, and this particular board is without a doubt the most balanced and a board that I've ever witnessed. And also, with regard to everyone on this board, we all make a serious effort to be informed on all the issues. We may not necessarily agree on everything, but that's okay. That's how varied opinions get discussed, and like I say, in a very respectful fashion. And all of us, not just in this audience, but in this community, should be grateful for that. I just wanted to say one more thing. It's a beautiful day outside today. And I was hoping that more of the blinds would have been open to let in the natural sunlight, but at least we have enough of that. And it's always a day to celebrate living in this beautiful community, and today is another day to do that. With that comment having ended,
I would like to open nomin. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. That's why I need prompting from the former president. Make sure I know what I'm doing, at least for the present moment. So we have two folks that would wish to address the issue of vice president of the board. The first person to speak is Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Must be an error of my ballpoint pen because I asked to speak on standing committee. I already spoke on vice president.
Okay, thank you. So we also have a request from Walt Andrus to speak on the item on vice president.
Thank you. Sorry, I submitted for the wrong era. I would just like to voice my support for Cindy Stidel. I've known Cindy for 7 years. I've worked with her on various projects and observed her in her interactions here and on the Finance Committee and NCAC. And I think she'll be a great vice president for this organization. And I want to thank her for her service so far. Thank you.
Thank you. See no other requests to speak on this item.
One more.
Thank you. All right. I actually can read the, well, I can't really read the writing, but I know who's standing in front of me. So, Michael Calderwood.
There's a whole convent of nuns who would agree with you on that, Harry. Mr. President. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I'm a little late. The line at Costco is crazy. I also want to echo support for Cindy Stidel for the role of Vice President. I would have spoken in her behalf had I gotten here a little sooner for the President's role also. Support for one does not mean not support for the others. Some of the comments I heard on my way here resonated with me. I think that this board over the past year has just been really terrific in getting really good dialogue going with the community. I think the addition of the committees has been really, really beneficial to everybody. I think as I was thinking about leadership roles, I thought to the excellent job that Dave Pearson has done over the past year, and also the excellent job that Amanda had done prior to that. And the things that were striking to me with similarities in how they approached the community, how they were firm in their position, but also incredibly open to dialogue, be it challenging or complementary dialogue. And I think those are traits of leadership that this community really benefits from. I think that Cindy would bring not only those traits, but also a real demonstrated skill to understand the complexity of issues and the interaction between the issues, how one applies to the other. In all the time she's served, I've never seen her look for the gotchas in the data. She's always brought issues forward and saying, here's an issue that I'd like to discuss, and here's how I might think we would solve it. So I think those are all excellent, excellent traits for leadership. Certainly, Don brings a lot of qualities also to that. So whatever choice we make here today will be a good one for the community. But if I had my druthers, I would go with Director Stidel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calderwood. We have two more requests to speak on this item. Donald Archer, followed by Rita Burton.
Thank you. I wanted to put in my support for Don Howe. I wasn't prepared really to talk about this, but one of the first things I remember about Don when he first came on the board was his question, as I recall it, of the district buying the truck and the deal that had been made at that. He was one of the only members that questioned that deal at that time, and it impressed me that he did his homework, that he was prepared right from the beginning. And it seems to be his nature to look into the financial matters of the community in a really microscopic way, which I think is important for from past issues that we've had in the community, from positions that the board has made, and that he's always made it clear that he values the money that this community is paying and that we as taxpayers contribute, and that he is our watch person to see that the money is well spent and carefully spent. Thank you, and I think he would be an excellent vice president choice.
Thank you, Mr. Archer. Next person to speak, Rita Burton.
Rita Burton, Cambria. I shall be extremely brief. Yes on Harry Farmer for president, and yes on Don Howell for vice president. Thank you.
You still got plenty of time if you want to speak some more. Just kidding, just kidding. Well, as soon as I'm able to set this, one moment, please. All right. So having had no more speaker slips available, so let me open the nominations for vice president.
I'd like to nominate Director Stidel for the office of Vice President of the Board.
And do we have a second?
I'll second that. I need to say something, though, and I second it. Many, many thanks again to all of my supporters who came to speak for that. I've considered this and had Director Pearson not nominated Cindy, I would have done so. I've been working with Cindy. I find that she's very capable. She's been easy to work with. And we have to remember that this is a cooperative effort. And I think that between Cindy and President Farmer, we have a nice balance of the various sides of, if there are sides to this community, and I keep trying to pretend there aren't. So I'm going to continue in that we're all blue-green somehow. So I do, with pleasure, second that motion.
Thank you, Director Howell. Are there any more comments? No, from the board? No, then I'll pass it over to Ms. Madrid and do a roll call, please.
Okay, Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. It appears to be unanimous as well, so it's a good start to the coming year. So moving back to, let's now move on, if I'm not mistaken, to item 1D, number 2, and that is regarding discussion and consideration of standing committee appointments. So the first, let me just move a couple of pages here. So first, let's take a look at the standing committee assignments. And the 3 standing committees, of course, that we have here in the community are for finance, resources and infrastructure, and policy. Currently serving as the director for finance is Vice President Stidel. Do you wish to continue in that capacity, Ms. Stidel?
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
You're welcome. Happy to serve in finance. That's nice. The next is resources and infrastructure. This past year, Director House started off in that capacity. Then he moved to the policy committee, and I became chair of resources and infrastructure. It's something that I've been very passionate about in the 3 years that I've served on this board. Having been on that committee in one capacity or another, first as an ad hoc committee and then as a standing committee. So I've, like I said, I've been intimately involved for the past 3 years. But in having a conversation on this item with former President Pearson, he has recommended that since this particular job, the one I happen to be sitting in for the past 15 minutes, requires a tremendous amount of time and energy, that he become the chairperson of Resources and Infrastructure, and knowing how hard that David works, I don't think that particular committee be any luckier than having David serve as chairperson. And how do you feel about that, David? Or should I say, Director Pearson?
Thank you. I'm filling big shoes because you, as you said, have been involved in that for 3 years and have done a outstanding job of keeping track of what's going on and making sure that the CIP is kept up and active and that we're doing the right things for the community. So I've got a lot of catching up to do, but the committee is an outstanding committee, and I feel they'll help me get along and catch up very quickly. So thank you.
I want to just second what you just said about the committee. Fine people, they've worked really hard, and you're very fortunate also to have Vice Chair Karen Dean assisting you. She really goes above and beyond, staying on top of things with regard to R&I. And now with regard to the Policy Committee, Director Howell has been serving as Chair of Policy, and are you enthusiastic about continuing in that capacity?
I'm not sure on enthusiasm. I have to confess that moving from infrastructure to policy, to me, was from the frying pan into the fire, I think. So on the other hand, it's a huge job, and we have some very hardworking committee members, so I feel I need to keep with them and help them to move forward, but it is a difficult job, and at some point in the future, I would look forward to giving it up, but not now.
Thank you. By the way, I just noticed, my apologies, Ms. Bettenhausen, did you wish to speak on this item? My apologies for not noticing this sooner.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I do wish to speak. It was a little unclear to me in the discussion section of your agenda on this item 1D2, I think it's 1D2, where it says the attachments of the other bylaws and the appointment, the various other committees are attached for the board's review. And I did not understand whether that meant you were going to do any reviewing of that today. But in case you might, I want to say one thing about that. If you would turn, please, to your 2019 committee and subject matter assignments. I love assigning subject matter. It has a certain quaintness to it, I think. But I want to ask you that not today, because I don't think it's really on your agenda, even though it says it is, when you do review this, perhaps at your next meeting or in January, I hope that you will take this into account. The public is interested in ad hoc committees. Oh, no, that's hyperbolic. I should not universalize my personal judgments. I am interested in ad hoc committees. I don't know what the whole public is interested in because I don't talk to them all. But I wish that you would schedule regularly, not simply sort of casual reporting from the liaisons or the ad hoc committees. I want this to be regularly in the agenda, and I would like you to say as a board of directors what exactly it is that you are doing as ad hoc committees. We used to have, as you know, ad hoc committees and no standing committees. Now we've got standing committees, 3 of them, and an increase of ad hoc committees. So there's something a little fudgy in the state of Denmark there, friends, and I hope that you will consider it in a near future meeting, if not today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll definitely take that under advisement, since we always have reports from the liaisons that we might include this as well. It actually sounds like a good idea. All right, moving on now to...
President Farmer, before we move on, I just have, if I might just interject a comment that we may want to look at as we review the bylaws, which would possibly be, in the past, the assignments for liaisons and ad hoc committees before we had standing committees was usually done in January. And if we were to put some language to that effect, that the heads of the standing committees would maybe be assigned in January, it gives a chance. We've only got one in this case this year. where the chair is changing, but would give a chance for the outgoing chair of those standing committees to kind of wrap up with that committee before they're just replaced by the next person. So maybe that's something we could look at in our bylaws to be more clear about, because if we're picking them annually, January doesn't seem like it would be a big deal. I mean, if there's a consensus on the board anyway.
Well, obviously, none of us is prepared to give a year in review today, but perhaps at the second, we might put it on the agenda for the second meeting of this year or the first meeting in January. Thank you. So moving forward now to ad hoc committees. And the first ad hoc committee to briefly discuss here is affordable housing, which from what I can see here has been Vice President Steidel and Director Howell. And do both of you wish to continue to serve on this committee assignment?
Personally, I would very much like to do it. I think that Director Howell and myself have invested a good deal of time and interest towards this, and I think that we've got a good grasp of the issues that are standing out from it and that we need to address. So I certainly would prefer to continue to participate in it and take it to completion.
Yes, I think at this point, it's a lot of work, but I think rather than having to redo it or bring someone else up to speed, it makes sense for us to go forward. Yes, and it's been a pleasure working with Vice President Steidel as well, so I have a good feeling. I think we'll come up with something good with this. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Getting back to a more official capacity here. With regard to the audit, we have Vice President Steidel and former President Pearson involved in the audit committee, and how do each of you feel about continuing in that capacity?
Personally, I think that we could probably disband this particular ad hoc committee. I think the finance standing committee does a good job of keeping track of where the audits are and can in the future. Director Steidel and I met with the finance manager a couple of times on this, and I think her competent review of the audits and everything is going to be fine in the future. So I think we could just disband this one if you're agreeing.
And I would agree. I think it's just another layer that becomes more bureaucratic than anything. I think there are two things that have contributed to that change from the establishment of it initially. And one is that the evolution of the budget process and the conditions have been put into place and controls have been put into place from that. The other thing is that I think that we're blessed with an excellent finance manager who is very, very strong in internal controls and very, very knowledgeable of how to move things forward financially. And I think the combination of those two things and the fact that the audit process that she's very much involved in now and bringing to fruition will be easier to work through in coming years because of the work that she's put into place now.
Thank you, and thank you, finance officers.
And President,
yes.
Farmer, I would like also to, as having given an acknowledgement to Ms. Duffield, I'd also like to say that her staff has been extraordinarily hardworking in working through the financial items that we've had going on lately, and actually I intend to bring an acknowledgement forward to the board on that, but just as an aside, wanted to mention that also.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item.
Point of order.
Excuse me.
Sorry, just a question for council. Do we need a motion to disband that subcommittee?
Yes, it would be better to have a motion for the record.
I so move.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Howell. I appreciate that. Moving on to the
Well, we have to take a vote.
and thank you, legal counsel too. So we need to vote on disbanding this. Okay. The audit committee. Thank you. So Ms. Madrid?
First.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Vice President Stidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. Moving on to the next committee assignment, Emergency Services, which has been, once again, former President Pearson and current Vice President Stidel. And how do both of you feel? It seems as if, both of you right now are already, serving on committees. Do both of you continue to want to serve on this one as well?
Again, I'm not sure what our charge is on this one. We did meet with the fire chief, and he is diligently working on disaster preparedness manual that's going to come before the full board at some point. But I don't know that we need an ad hoc on this one either.
Especially since we have a liaison to the Fire Safe Focus Group, which gives us a connection, communication-wise, it would seem.
The only other thing that I can think of is that there's going to be that that town hall that the county has is bringing forward, that has to do with the egress from the community out on Highway 1, and it's possible that there might be something that comes out of there that could be considered. So rather than disbanding, I guess I wouldn't have any problem with using language that says that the committee would meet as necessary with the development of actions that might come from some of the things that are being pulled together regarding reaction to fire safety within the community.
Yes, Director Rice.
I think that you make a very good point, Vice President Stidel. I also think that ad hoc committees are supposed to be for a certain purpose, and if we don't have a clear purpose, and it's within the president's authority to appoint, create and appoint members to an ad hoc committee if it's needed. And therefore, I think it would be appropriate if we disbanded this ad hoc. I think eventually it would be nice to have a standing committee for the fire department. I mean, it's a third of our budget, and it's a really important part of what we do here. So, I mean, I kind of find that I think that if we need another ad hoc committee for that particular purpose, then we can form that.
Okay, I have no problem with that.
Then I move that we disband the Emergency Services Ad Hoc Committee.
And I'll second that.
All right. Ms. Madrid, could we take a roll call vote, please?
Director Rice?
Aye.
Vice President Stidel?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye. Moving on to the next one, which is the GM Search Committee, and it doesn't appear that this committee is necessary at this time either.
I move that we disband the Ad Hoc GM Search Committee.
And I second that.
All right. Once again, yes.
Question first?
Yes.
In terms of these ad hoc committees, if the action or activity of the committee has been completed, does that automatically take it to a position of being disbanded?
We have to take action.
But still, you need to take action. Okay, just educational purposes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So,
That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Carmel?
For the record, it's always good to have some formal action to close it.
thank you, Director Rice. Former president as well. Thank you. Ms. Madrid, once again, a roll call vote, please.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Stidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. Moving on to grants, and that is just under the purview of the Finance Committee. And I believe, would you like to make any comment on that, Vice President Stidel?
Well, this is a little bit of an intangible in that I think some of the things that we've been working through so far haven't directed us towards having to review any grants. And grants probably can come from a lot of different places, even from R&I. in terms of identification or something that staff has brought forward. I think it's just a matter of the fact that there haven't been any for consideration or review, but the idea that the Finance Committee should still be in a position of reviewing grants, I think is appropriate.
Thank you very much. I believe this has been discussed before, but it would be good maybe to have a combined ad hoc committee, so to speak, between finance and R&I and pursuing grants. You folks, pursuing the funding side, so to speak, and then R&I coming up with the items that need funding. So we can look into that in the future, perhaps.
I agree that that's one avenue that happens, but the other avenue is that if there's something that's identified out of R&I, and R&I is bringing forward the scope and criteria of a grant, Finance Committee is looking at it in terms of the appropriateness in terms of cost and whether it's something that can be accommodated within, are there implications for budgetary impacts or any of those kinds of things. So it's more, I see that more as the mechanism of the Finance Committee than the idea that they're supposed to be going out and looking for grants.
All right.
Although that doesn't preclude them from doing it. I'm just saying that I don't know that that's the major drive.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Unless anyone else on the board feels differently.
Director Rice.
I think that it's important to have a specific either committee or director who the public knows they should be addressing either an email or a comment to if they discover there's a grant. Because there's a lot of people in this community that have done grant writing, that know how to find grants, that if they have done a search and they go, oh, we've got these couple of things, it'd be nice to know who we should channel that toward first. And in that situation, I don't know what that answer would be, but it might be that it comes through the GM to the board and then the board decides. I just want it to be clear if there's people in the community, because I know there are people in the community always looking for opportunities for this community, so that would be my only consideration.
I guess that could happen either direction depending on how the rest of the board is what methodology the board's comfortable with. There certainly could be, for instance, it could be the chair of the Finance Committee that could be directed to, who would then make sure that that was forwarded to staff, to the GM, to work with staff as appropriate, or it could just come to the GM. It could be viewed by GM and staff and then go forward to the board, but then potentially the board may not know about something that's a possibility. So I guess I'd be inclined to go with the first rather than the second option there.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you both.
So is that something that we'd like to put forward as a board, that as a point of contact in the way that the Director Rice described it?
The Finance Committee is a good place to start for that, if you find something that might be an opportunity for the district. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding.
Yes, I would absolutely agree that the Finance Committee would be the start, and then they could then direct it out to one of the other standing committees or bring it to the board for the board to direct it to a standing committee or form an ad hoc for that particular grant or something like that.
Because some of the grants are fire-related, or fire protection-related, I should say, which means that since we don't have a standing committee for that department, as it were, that starting at finance is a good way to.
Yep.
So it appears that we should consider this as a future agenda item when necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be great.
Thank you. Moving on to the next ad hoc committee assignment, which is the Emergency Water Facility, Sustainable Water Facility, Advanced Water Treatment Plant, and the pursuit of the Coastal Development Permit. And so far, we've had former President Pearson and Director Rice serving in this committee, and I don't think there's any reason to make any changes there. How do both of you feel?
Yeah, I'm fine with going on.
Yeah, I'm fine with going on. What I would like to get some direction from the board on, for one thing, is I've always considered it the CDP committee and not on the SWF. Or whatever, that it's about following and monitoring for the permitting.
Right.
And if it's the consensus of if the board would agree, I think bringing back a clear purpose to that ad hoc committee, like we know we're done when we get the permit, but what kinds of things is it that the CDP committee is going to do? Because I won't be running for re-election, therefore probably at least midway through the year, we should consider putting somebody else on the committee so they can kind of come up to speed. And I don't know how Director Pearson feels about continuing, but I don't know if he's running for office either. But I just want to try and maintain some continuity. So coming back to the board maybe with a plan that says, here's kind of the plan that we'd like to follow, if that's acceptable, and Director Pearson agrees, then.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, and I think next week, when we have our reports from the different ad hocs and everything, I think that would be a good time for us to kind of bring everybody up to speed and also to talk about what we do and what our aim is in the future, so.
Well, thank you both, and thank you, Director Rice, for bringing us up to speed on how you're feeling on this issue. Moving further on here with regard to Tyler Encode, which is moving somewhat slowly, I guess you could say, and it's going to take a little bit of time, and perhaps Finance Officer Ms. Duffield can bring us up to speed on what's happening with regard to Tyler Encode. But right now, it's Director Howell and yours truly serving in this capacity, and I had suggested that perhaps Vice President Stidel, since she has a background in finance, that she be more involved with this, but it seems like you're already involved in it. So I'm more than willing to, I believe it was former President Pearson who suggested that I be involved in this because I know nothing. And therefore, I could come from the viewpoint of somebody who is just an average person and needs to understand this a little bit better. So I guess I should trust the good judgment of our former president, and so it will. So how do you feel about Director Howell, you continuing on this particular committee?
Yes, I'm happy to continue on that one.
Okay, so we'll both do that, and hopefully Ms. Duffield is satisfied as well in that regard. Thank you.
President Farmer?
Yes.
I would like to get some clarity, perhaps maybe at the next meeting, just having Tyler Encode. I don't know what the purpose of the ad hoc committee is, because the staff is going to have to implement. So I'd just like to kind of get greater clarity, and it may be as simple as a sentence. I just want to have more clarity on what the purpose is for the committee. Because if it's helpful for Ms. Duffield and for the staff to have this ad hoc committee, then,
Well, Ms. Duffield, would you wish to comment on what Director Rice just said?
So we are in the very early stages of working with our project manager at Tyler. And so far, we've had, I think, 3 conference calls to date, and we're starting to get small homework assignments. So at this point, it's hard to tell how many resources we need to do what activities. So at this point, it's all kind of been in my lap, but that could change over time. So whether your board decides to continue the committee or disband it would completely be up to you. You may want to disband it for the moment, and as things progress, maybe in the next 6 months, there may be a desire to reestablish it. It's completely your call.
So let me ask you this, Ms. Duffield, and I don't know if this is an appropriate question to ask you, but do you feel there is a need for you to be assisted in one fashion or another by an ad hoc committee?
Not at this time, because everything is, going in baby steps. At this point, it's going to be like data that they're going to have to have downloaded from our current financial system. And that may or may not be something that we can accomplish as staff. We might have to hire a consultant to do such an activity. So at this point, really it's in-house resources that have to be doing the actions that we've been requested to date. But like I said, that could change, you know, over the next couple of meetings. We're meeting with them every 2 weeks. So as things progress, you know, we can have more conversation. It's completely up to your decision.
Well, in considering what you just said, we might as well just leave it kind of an open-ended ad hoc committee, and will we just touch base with you when you feel it's necessary?
Okay, and you're both in the email loop so that you're
Right.
getting the appointments when we meet every 2 weeks. And, you know, if you have time to join us, that's great. If it doesn't work in your schedule, we can just fill you in.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, yes, Director Howell.
Oh, well, I think almost everything has been said. I just wanted to say that while there's nothing that we can materially do at the moment, to be involved in the process can be very helpful as it moves forward, because I'm almost certain that we're going to need more resources than what we presently have. And so to have board members, rather than having to come to the board later and try to explain why you need to hire these 3 other people, for example, it would be good if you had a board member at least involved, so that member or members could explain to the others why that might be important. So I think just at this point, it's more in the nature of an observer, but it is possible that with our experience, should a question come up, we might be able to offer something. But right now, it's just a matter of keeping us in the loop, I think. Apropos of that, I'm going to have to miss your next meeting on the following Wednesday, but after that, I'll attend religiously.
All right, thank you so much, Director Howell. So we have 2 more ad hoc committee assignments, although only one is listed here. The other one is water efficiency, and that is under the purview of Resources and Infrastructure Committee. And then we have one that, like I say, it's not listed here, and it's one that Director Howell and I are involved with in conjunction with Finance Officer Duffield. And it has to do with rate assistance for people with low incomes. And having gotten together, I think twice, we have discovered that this particular process, well, first off, Ms. Duffield is still dealing with the audit, so she hasn't really had the time to really get further involved in this particular committee. But we're finding that it's a much more difficult circumstance. It's not as simple as it would appear to be, and it's probably going to be a few months down the road before we're even able to come up to speed and get some conclusion as to how to move forward with this committee. I mean, how would move forward in assisting the residents that would require this kind of service. Would that make sense to you, Ms. Duffield?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you. Moving on now to liaison assignments. Yes, Director Pearson.
I think we might want to add an ad hoc committee here as was indicated in the newspaper today. We are starting to work with San Simeon and with Supervisor Gibson on possible long-term agreements with San Simeon on wastewater treatment. And so I've been to one of those meetings, and President Farmer was at that meeting also. But I think an ad hoc committee would be a good idea to establish with the idea that they would meet with San Simeon and Supervisor Gibson to move forward on that, with obviously the general manager and his staff attending also. So I hereby recommend that we go ahead and establish a ad hoc committee for studying wastewater treatment, regional wastewater treatment opportunities, I guess.
I would go ahead and second that, but first, let me ask either the general manager or legal counsel, should this be more further defined as an item to maybe put on a future agenda, and then we have a discussion as to forming this committee, as opposed to just doing it right now, I mean?
Yes.
Okay, so we will make that as a future agenda item. Thank you. And thank you.
Good point.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I would say this, that probably since both Director Pearson and myself attended that meeting, that it would hopefully just be it would be the two of us that would continue in that capacity. Moving on to liaison assignments. So first we have the Fire Safe Focus Group, and I know Director Pearson has been intimately involved in this fashion, so I'm sure you wish to stay on in this regard, right?
Yes.
Okay. Next is the Cambria Forest Committee, and yours truly has been the liaison there, and I wish to continue in that capacity, as well as with Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve. So seeing no opposition, thank you so much. And with regard to North Coast Advisory Council, at the present time, it is Director Howell. Director Howell, how are you feeling about continuing in this regard?
First of all, I want to say I've enjoyed thoroughly the time that I have spent as liaison for the North Coast Advisory Council, and at some future point, I would look forward to doing it again. But for this coming year, I think I would prefer to step down from that position. Again, I do emphasize to any NCAC members who might be listening or who are here that I really thoroughly found the meetings extremely helpful and interesting to me in understanding the community and the various concerns, and I do look forward to future relationship. But for the time being, I'd like to take a hiatus on that.
All right, thank you. So it would appear that there are 3 members on the board right now. Of course, Ms. Seidel is serving on the NCAC committee, if I'm not mistaken, as an alternate. So it would be up to either Director Pearson or Director Rice or myself to take over in this capacity. And Director Pearson, I think you've expressed an interest in doing this, right?
Yeah, I was contacted by NCAC President McDonald about having a representative from the Fire Safe Focus Group attend all of their meetings, so I could actually double whammy. Yes.
2 for 1. You only get paid for 1 meeting.
Yes. So if no one else wants to do it, I'd be glad to fill in on that one.
Do we need to make a motion to do this, or just say, okay, oh, that's cool? All right. So I'll make the motion that, I guess I can do that, that Director David Pearson take over as the liaison to the North Coast Advisory Council. And do we have?
Second.
All right. So Ms. Madrid?
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye, thank you. All right, so we have 2 more items here. San Simeon CSD liaison has been Director Rice. Director Rice, how are you feeling about this?
I'm willing to continue to serve, and I'd like to be considered to be on the ad hoc committee for the regional program, because I've been liaison for San Simeon for quite a while. I've been attending their meetings for a long time. I know we're not making that decision today, but I'd just like to be considered for it, especially if I'm going to continue to be the liaison from our board to theirs.
Okay, well.
So I would like to continue with just that comment.
All right, well, I hope you weren't offended with the earlier discussion.
Not in the slightest.
Thank you. And finally, another one that's not on the list, it does appear that we have a liaison for the California Coastal Commission. So perhaps we should have a discussion on that matter. Does anyone wish to make a comment? Director Pearson.
Yeah, I think Director Rice has been that person regardless of whether we've had an official assignment or not, and I think she's done a great job. I think we need to continue to do this. especially with the CDP coming up and her being on the CDP ad hoc, it just makes sense for her to be the liaison there. She has attended meetings for a long time and has great contacts already there. And I think her continuing to go to those meetings and participate would be excellent. I think if she's not going to the meetings necessarily to speak on behalf of the board unless we direct her to, but we are asking her to liaison, get to know the people, and listen to the comments that are made about various subjects, not just ours. So, and report back to us. So I'd appreciate if she continue in that role.
Okay, so I just want to ask one question of both of you, in other words, Director Pearson and Director Rice. Even though obviously items that pertain to the district don't come up at every Coastal Commission monthly meeting, do you still feel that it would be to the advantage of the district and staff and the community to attend every month? I just want your feedback on that regard.
So I don't attend every month. I attend when it's near enough by for me to drive to keep costs low, because if it's longer than a 4-hour drive, by policy, we could fly. But I generally just go to the ones that are within about a 4 to 5 hour drive, and which means that it's about 4 or 5 times a year at the most. Often I don't go because not just distance, but there isn't anything of interest, not just for Cambria, but similar to things that we deal with in Cambria. This month they had a strategic planning session that they dealt with yesterday, and I think it's helpful for me to be watching and attending when possible. Last month when I attended the meeting in Half Moon Bay, I had an opportunity to talk to Tom Lester a little bit and give him an update on where we were. The next day we were going to be meeting and talking about the CDP, getting the update from Mr. Ogren about the CDP. So I was able to, in person, have a discussion with him, like, here's what's coming up. So then things just don't come out from out of the blue for the staff. So I do think it's valuable. The new chair, Steve Padilla, and the new vice chair, Donna Brownsey, who are two people who I've actually met with a number of times. One of the advantages of having Dean Flores advocate for us was he introduced me to, and we had lunch with Donna Brownsey when the commission was in Cambria last time. So I do think that it's advantageous. I don't ever talk about the CDP necessarily, but they like to know what's going on in Cambria. They care. They want to know what's happening. So that's kind of what I do, is I provide them an update on here's the generals of what's up.
Well, thank you for those comments. And I do want to make a remark, and I don't even know if this is appropriate, but the Coastal Commission did meet here. It was a couple of years ago. I believe it was in September, and they had such fond affection for the community that they came back the following February, which probably didn't make a lot of other coastal communities all that happy, but it's Cambria. So do I have a motion to approve a liaison to the California Coastal Commission?
Is that something that has to go on to a future agenda?
I don't think so.
Technically, yes, but I'd be comfortable with you doing it now.
Okay.
All right then. So does anyone wish to make that
Mr.
motion?
Chairman? No. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I'll
And
second that.
a second, all right. So thank you for doing that very quickly there. So Ms. Madrid, could we have a quick roll call? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties.
Gee, I can't imagine that happening.
Okay, Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Stidel? Aye. Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. I don't know if we anticipated this particular item taking this long, but we are now back to normal programming, or regular programming, I guess you could say. Councilor Carmel, do we have any report from closed session?
President Farmer, the board continued to provide directions to its labor negotiators and discuss the performance of the general manager. There was an additional item of anticipated litigation, but there was not enough time to get there. That's on today's agenda, and there's no formal action to report.
Thank you very much. Any agenda reviews, additions, or deletions? Seeing none, I don't see Mr. Niffen in the audience to make his pros chairman report. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you, we have an alternate stepping up to the microphone. Thank you, Adolph.
Thank you. I'm Adolph Potencio. I'm the vice chairman of the pros committee. So last month's meeting, we actually discussed 3 different issues. One was the skate park. Another was a restroom for the community park. And the other was we had a general discussion about resources. So starting with the skate park, we got a letter several, maybe weeks ago from Mr. Kelly, whose grandson, et cetera, was complaining about the condition of the community, of the skate park. And the skate park, as we inspected it, and Carlos from the maintenance department inspected it, we found that the ramp really is in terrible condition. And the decision that was made for that was to basically remove that ramp, which leaves us with a skate park that's still not open. We also had discussions about who uses it, and it turns out that we don't have a whole lot of use in the community from our folks, but there are people who come here from other places and use it. So to restore that skate park back to, and have it as a resource, we would probably have to go through a design phase and a construction phase. And the estimated cost of something like that, based on other communities who have one, is around $100K. So obviously we don't have the resources to do that at the moment, and we'll keep that on our schedule. So moving on to the community park, one of the issues that we've been discussing on the community park is on phase 2 was putting a restroom in the community park. And we've had one of our members of the board, Kermit Johansson, who's gone through a bit of study to see what we can actually put there and what it might cost. And we've been looking at basically prefabbed toilets. And we've looked at the cost of doing something like that, and that again is a resource item that's not cheap, where we would basically buy a kit to put that restroom in the park, but the kit itself is about $85,000 to $90,000. But then we would have to hire someone to put it together, put a slab down, do the plumbing, so forth and so on. And that estimate turns out to be well over, well, not well over, but approximately a couple $100,000. So that's still on the agenda, but we'll talk about that later. And the third thing we talked about basically was resources. The pros committee is always short of resources. We actually gave up our last year's budget in order to take care of the demolition of the skate park and possibly a redesign of it. But, and so we really have 0 funds this year. And one of the things we discussed when we talked about resources was we need to find a way to raise some resources in order to take care of the community park and other resources we have in the community for parks and recreation. And that's probably a discussion another day, and we'll come back and report on that. So it's basically what we talked about, and Steve gives his regards. I guess he's out of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the board? Yes, Director Howell.
About the skate park, do I understand then that there's the idea of doing anything with the skate park has been abandoned, or going forward? I know we're going to be asked these questions.
Well, we haven't really abandoned it. One of the suggestions was made that we basically get into a situation as to how the community feels about a skate park. And I know that it's a resource we've had for a long time. And so we're obviously trying to survey those who might use it by having liaisons to the schools in the area, so forth and so on. And also, since it is a facility that visitors would use, that's also an attraction basically for the families who come to Cambria. But on the other hand, it does cost a bit of money to construct one.
Director, Vice President Stidel?
Two is, I know this was probably asked and answered before, but I'm sure liability insurance is carried on that skate park, particularly with people from out of town coming in to use it. And so in addition to the cost of the skate park itself, there's also liability insurance that carries with it. Do we know about how much that is a year?
I'm not familiar with the cost. I do know that there is a sign that has been put up at the skate park basically saying you're using it at your own risk. I know what that means. I mean, the lawyers probably can answer that question better than I can.
Right.
Ms. Madrid, did you have a comment to make as well?
Yeah, we have the sign up because in order for us to get the immunity, we have to post the sign. But because we're a government agency, we have immunity from liability on the skate park.
Hey, if I just want to ask you one thing, I think you alluded to this during your report. Thank you so much. But have you gotten any feedback from the youngsters who have been using the facility, or feedback from the parents as to how much they wish the facility, that we had one?
Unfortunately, we only had Mr. Kelly, I believe it was, who has a grandson who basically brought up the issue of the park being in poor shape.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have one of our members of the pros committee who's going to kind of make this survey with the parents and the children in the community to see whether or not they would in fact use it.
All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
And have a good holiday, okay?
Thank you.
All right, moving forward, hard to believe. Not that we're moving forward, but it's hard to believe that we're moving forward to public comment at 3:25 on a Thursday afternoon. And our first request to speak is Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I hope that the Board of Directors of CCSD will establish a clear policy about the way consultants are selected for the CCSD. I read a ProPublica article the other day investigating the recent history of the Rikers Island analysis. And in the article, this paragraph appeared. What happened at Rikers is a cautionary tale of a public sector consulting boom that has emerged over the past decade. In recent years, government agencies across the United States have entrusted management consultants with more and more facets of public administration, from designing school systems to shaping Medicaid policy. Public sector consulting in North America is a more than $9 billion industry, with an average yearly growth rate of about $500 million. According to ALM Intelligence, which monitors the consulting business. The CCSD hires many consultants, I have found, over the past 17 years, and we spend a great deal of money for consulting. In 17 years, it's never been clear to me by what criteria these decisions are made, apparently only by staff who have the authority to hire consultants. Historical inertia and behind-the-scenes connections often seem to prevail in the hiring of consultants by the CCSD. Please make it clear to the public at a future meeting how the CCSD staff determines that a consultant needs to be hired, for what purpose, and at what cost in relationship to the responsibilities of the current members of the staff. I will send this to you via email because I think it's one of the important fiscal responsibility issues of this board, to look into this question, and I heard many comments today from all of you, from most of you, that would lead me to believe that I should put this email into the mail quickly in bold and in italics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bettenhausen. I had a request to speak from Hank from San Simeon, but I believe he's left. So all right, well, thank you. I also have, I don't know quite how to interpret this, but I have a wish to speak on public comment, and it's signed Amanda Rice. Okay, so Director Rice, step right up. Oops.
I want to be timed. That's why I want to be over here. Also, I'm speaking as Amanda Rice and not Director Rice, because I just want to be clear about that. This Saturday, 2 days hence, is the 14th Annual Needs and Wishes Holiday Fundraiser. It's in Los Osos. It benefits 40 Prado Homeless Services Center, the Slow Noor Clinic, which is a free health clinic for those who are uninsured, and People Helping People's Portable Shower Project for the homeless. It happens at South Bay Community Center, which is on Palisades Avenue in Los Osos. 100% of the proceeds from the silent auction, the toy donations, brand new toys, and everything else go to these organizations, and there's no admission. I try to get my Christmas presents there every year because the silent auction makes it easy to get things from art to appliances. I got a really good new blender last year and an awesome little portable speaker. There's also a toy shop, which is all brand new toys, so instead of having to go to the defunct Toys R Us or some mall that doesn't exist in this county, you can go and get extremely good price on a brand new toy for a child in your life, and 100% of the proceeds go to these causes. There's also entertainment all day long, including one of my very favorites, which is a Japanese drumming group. They're called the Ichimi Daiko Drum Group. And they go on at 2 p.m., and I put flyers on the front table if anybody would like more information. If you can't go but you would like to donate to the cause, that information is also on these flyers. If you would like to talk to me about further information, my number is 805-909-0814. It's 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. in Los Osos this coming Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Our next request to speak is Mark Larson, followed by Christine Heinrich.
Good afternoon. Thank you, President Farmer, members of the board, and staff. I am here today on a mission of what is to me utter joy. I would like to request that this body agenda in the future a determination to make January the 20th next year, 2020, Joe Ellen Butler Day. And here's my thinking. Many of you know Ms. Butler. She's been a member of this community for 47, 48 years or so. I have the pleasure and privilege of working with her every day. She is the executive director of Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve. I happen to be the chair of the board of directors, and I cannot tell you what a privilege it has been to know this young woman. She is an asset to this community every day, and as far as I can tell, has been since she moved here back in the 1970s. Now, admittedly, January the 20th next year is Martin Luther King Day. I don't think Dr. King would be offended were Ms. Butler to be recognized on that day, and for that reason, I come to you with this request. thank you for entertaining this. I understand there may be a board meeting not too far off into the future, perhaps even next week. And I would just respectfully request that we agenda this item for that proceeding and that we go forward from that point. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Does anyone on the board have any comments? Director Pearson.
Yeah, I would certainly support anything that we can do for doing exactly this, and maybe even having her come to our January whatever meeting and getting a plaque or something,
Proclamation, right.
et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we should direct staff to do that, and can we get it on the agenda for next week to do that proclamation? Or do we can do it for the first meeting in January, right? And do the whole thing then?
And if I recall, it is one of the privileges of president, if you want to present a proclamation. I know President Robinette gave a proclamation to the Historical Society when she was president. So I believe that unless there's some reason why we couldn't have the president's prerogative to do a proclamation of some sort. And I'm looking to Mr. Carmel to make sure we're not outside of what would be allowed.
No, that's fine.
Wonderful, perfect. President Farmer's already having some impact on you.
All right. Well, let me just say that Mr. Larson and I have already discussed this item, and I've known Joellen Butler for many years, and her and I served with the Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch, which began in 1992 and lasted for 8 years. And both of us worked very hard, as well as many other people and people that volunteered and donated money to ultimately save the Fiscalini Ranch. But Joellen Butler was certainly involved during Friends of the Ranchland, and she was actually the only person ever arrested for trespassing on the ranch. Once that's another story, but for nothing other than that, she should get a proclamation. But so Mr. Larson and I are going to get together and write that up, and I think that would be a good thing.
Very good. Thank you for the privilege of appearing before you.
Thank you, Mark. All righty, next is going to be Christine Heinrich.
Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I asked the board to address a continuing issue. 2 more permits for construction have been passed through staff rather than aired before the board and the public, the Hench Addition and the Satimi House. They will increase water use and should not have been approved. The Coastal Commission has been clear on 3 recent similar permit applications that no new construction can be allowed in Cambria until the water situation is resolved. The Commission has accepted its staff reports recommending that the Commission take jurisdiction over these permits and deny them. The Board continues to allow staff to approve these permits despite the Commission's stern words and actions. The Coastal Commission has said over and over, quote, "There is not an adequate sustainable water supply to provide new water service to serve new development in Cambria, and it is not adequate even for existing development, a factual finding that has been repeatedly determined by the Commission in relation to Cambria development through multiple actions, including certification of local coastal plan provisions specific to the present lack of available water and imposing specific water supply requirements and CDP actions. The sources of Cambria's water supply, Santa Rosa and San Simeon Creeks, are environmentally sensitive habitat areas that are currently being adversely affected by existing water extractions to support existing development in Cambria," end quote. It is wrong for the board to allow development in defiance of laws that protect the environment and all Cambrians. It is distasteful that the board allows a staff member to process these applications so that they remain outside public scrutiny. I ask you again today to take charge of this process. Require that all permit applications involving water use come before the board. If you choose to defy the law by approving them, at least the public will know about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further requests to speak on public comment, we'll finally, oddly enough, move forward to regular business. The first item on regular business is, excuse me, establishing the schedule, discussion and consideration of adoption of resolution. I should probably have handed this off to our general manager. My apologies, Mr. Weigold.
Thank you, Mr. President. Agenda item number 4A, staff recommends that the board discuss the proposed 2020 regular board meeting dates and consider adopting resolution 43-2019 establishing the 2020 CSD regular board meeting schedule. Attached is Exhibit A with proposed dates, which are generally in line with our second and third weeks of the month.
So I'd like just to make a comment. I recall that last year there were a couple of times when we had to kind of all, how could we say, change the schedule due to events that conflicted with our meetings or vice versa. Do we anticipate anything like that happening this year? Ms. Madrid?
Last year, we scheduled around them, and I don't think it's an effect for any of these, because it's the second January, it's the Wine and Art Festival, but I think that's the first weekend.
Okay, thank you. I seem to recall the Wildflower Show conflicted because that was just a scheduling snafu with regard to the Vets Hall. So let me just, it's also been suggested that perhaps Director Pearson, did you wish to say something?
Well, the only thing I had on here was that I'm wondering whether the January meetings are going to be a little early. Having the first meeting on the 9th of January might be a crunch on getting the agenda packet together and everything. So we might want to move those meetings to 3rd and 4th Thursdays. I don't know, just for discussion. Otherwise, I didn't see any issues, and I know we might want to talk about what time we have meetings and that kind of thing, but I think the 2 o'clock has been working pretty well, so thanks.
All right, so I guess we would have to check and make sure that the hall would be available at that time.
Yeah, if you give me just a minute, I'm pulling it up.
All right, thank you. In the yes, Vice President Steidel.
Just for reference sake, for people's planners, that would push the first meeting to the 16th, and the second meeting would then push out to the 23rd.
Thank you. So with regard to, there has been some discussion about maybe moving meetings, some of the meetings to a later time in the day to accommodate folks' schedules. I believe we did that a few years ago, and if my memory serves me correctly, we didn't have many people attending those meetings where we changed them to 4 and 6 o'clock. And I think Director Pearson just said that just keeping them at 2 o'clock would be a wise move. Also, I'll ask for comments on that, but I'd also just want to suggest, and I don't know how staff would feel about this, or if the hall is available, or how the directors would feel about this, but I believe other communities like alternate and would, when they have 2 meetings a month, they're not consecutive. How do people feel about maybe doing the second and fourth Thursdays of the month? Does anybody on the board have any comment on that? Yes, Director Rice.
When we were looking at this while I was president, one of the things that came up was the concern among staff that they would then be in perpetual agenda prep mode if they were spread out, and that grouping them together provided for some time where they weren't in agenda prep mode, and and that could be also a function of the way it was being done under a prior GM. But that was the concern that we kind of talked through at that time. I think the second and third works good because we then also don't lose any of the, it's still kind of fresh in your mind if it's not every other week.
Sure.
And it gives us all a chance to kind of at least have a week where we don't have to necessarily think about it all the time. Whereas, you know, if staff is in a perpetual agenda prep, that means we're in perpetual meeting prep. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Most communities in this county, in fact, most communities in this state don't hold their meetings in the afternoons. They hold them in the evening time because most communities can't have 5 people on a board who can afford to miss that many days of work in a month and replace it with a $100 check. So, and that's been an argument that I've raised before, and it may become more of an issue. I have an interview next Wednesday for a full-time job, which may then preclude me from being able to attend meetings before 5:30. And I can try and take as many time off, and hopefully if I get this position, everybody knock wood, then hopefully I would be able to excuse myself slightly early on meeting days because it is with a government agency that understands these kind of things. But I just wanted to raise it now. We can set it for 2 p.m. for most of the year, and then we may have to come back to it depending on what happens. Cross your fingers, knock on wood, whatever you want to do, that I get this position. So.
All right, well, we wish you all the best in that, Director Rice. Vice President Steidel.
I'm also a supporter of sticking with the second and third weeks. One other attribute of stretching things out is that we might create a bit of a little rat's nest for ourselves in dealing with information that rolls out from our standing committees for timing and action, and actually may end up pushing the board's actions out additionally because of that. So right now I think there's some grouping that supports that flow.
All right, thank you. Any comments from staff? Ms. Madrid, Ms. Duffield?
Well, if I may, I recall that the issue was that staff would be here all day and then all night. That's what staff's concern was. But I suppose if necessary, we could adjust our schedules and come in maybe later in the day, if that's the board's desire.
From time of day, but as far as the second and third week versus like the second and fourth week.
Well, we're in perpetual agenda mode by having 2 agendas anyways, or 2 meetings anyways, so I don't think that particular issue matters.
Okay. Well, I think the observations made by Director Rice make it pretty easy to say that second and third works best. Thank you. So these dates, do we need to make a motion to approve? I guess we, yes, General Manager Weigold.
In follow-up to Director Pearson's note, I do think it would be helpful to slide the 2 January dates 1 week, because the agenda prep happens the week before the meeting up, and that's right in the middle of the holiday there, and January 1st. So I think trying to get everything together that week probably a good choice to move it, the following week.
All right, so other than those adjustments with regard to the month of January.
I have the calendar up.
Pardon me?
I have the Vets Hall calendar up now.
Okay, thank you.
On the 23rd, the Art and Wine Festival is scheduled to be in here on the 23rd. I'd have to call them and check to see what time they're coming in. I'm assuming it's for setup, but it shows them in there for the whole day.
So for that
Is
one
there-
time in January, should we have a Tuesday meeting? Or a Wednesday meeting? Just to,
The 16th
Be
is
able to
fine
slide
because
that.
it's already reserved.
yeah, 16th is good, but then the following week, we'd have to either do it Tuesday or Wednesday, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Would that work okay for staff to
On the 20th.
have them just like 5 days apart? 5 or 6 days apart, so to speak?
I wouldn't be able to attend on the Tuesday. I think I could on the Wednesday.
So is Wednesday the 22nd available, Ms. Madrid?
Yes.
So let me just ask the members of the board, does that work in your calendars?
It works for mine.
Yes, I'm good that day.
I'm also good that day.
Okay, well, I'll take a chance that I'll be available then as well, and hopefully we'll just make that, we'll just let folks here right now know that that those that normally attend at our meeting, their second meeting in January, will be on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday, and perhaps you can pass that along to other folks that normally attend that aren't here right now. Thank you. So do I have a motion to approve our regular meeting schedule for 2020?
We have to stick a time in there on
Oh,
all
okay,
those dates.
thank you. So should we stick with 2 p.m. for every meeting until further notice? All right, thanks. All right, so thank you very much. So now, anyone wish to make a motion? Vice President Steidel, I see your light on.
Right, and I'm just trying to roll up on the statement for that item so that I've got the right numbers for reference. Okay, regarding agenda item 4A for consideration of adopting Resolution 43, 2019 for the regular board meeting, as approved as listed with the exception of cancellation of January 9th and the additional meeting for the month to be on January 22nd. Times of all dates are 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call, Ms. Madrid?
Director Steidel?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. It appears to me that we are now kind of getting into more regular business, and these next items might be a bit lengthy. So seeing that we've been here almost 2 hours, why don't we take a 10-minute break and come back at 4 o'clock and move forward with agenda item 4B. Thank you. All right, welcome back. Yeah. So, AGP, are we ready to go? Cool. All right, moving forward, we've arrived at agenda item 4B. General Manager Weigel, would you wish to introduce this item, please?
Yes, Mr. President, the agenda item 4B is discussion and consideration of introduction of ordinance 03-2019, which amends sections of the CCSD municipal code relating to delinquent water bills, and adoption of resolution 45-2019, establishing a policy for the discontinuance of residential water service in compliance with the Water Shutoff Protection Act. And for further discussion, I'll turn it over to our District Council, Tim Carmel.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Farmer, members of the board. I'll be brief. Last year, state legislature adopted Senate Bill 998, the Water Shutoff Protection Act, which is codified in the California Health and Safety Code. The bill applies to urban water suppliers, which are public water systems that supply water to more than 3,000 service connections. As an urban water supplier, the CCSD is required to comply with this new law by February 1st, 2020. Last August, the Board of Directors discussed and considered an agenda item relating to the requirements of the newly adopted legislation. Those requirements are set forth in detail in the staff report. Among other things, SB 998 requires the district to have a written policy on discontinuation of water services, prohibits discontinuance until accounts are at least 60 days delinquent, requires 7 business days notice before discontinuance, and prohibits discontinuance when doing so would pose a serious threat to the health and safety of a resident if the customer demonstrates an inability to pay and is willing to make payments via alternative methods. This policy must be posted on the district's website and contain a plan for deferred or reduced payments, alternative payment schedules, appeal and contest procedures, and a phone number for customers to call to avert discontinuation. The CCSD Municipal Code has several provisions in it that address non-payment of bills and delinquent accounts. We are recommending that the ordinance being presented to you today be introduced. It can then be adopted at the December 19th board meeting and will be effective 30 days after. Since the new law only applies to residential accounts, the ordinance will amend the code to clarify that the current provisions apply only to non-residential accounts, and procedures for residential accounts are to be adopted by resolution. Adopting the policy on discontinuance of residential water services by resolution will make it easier to comply with any future changes to related laws. A proposed policy has also been drafted to comply with SB 998, and a resolution has been prepared for board consideration to adopt the new policy. I'd be glad to answer any questions as long as they don't involve math. Those go to Pam.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carmel. That was, I think, fairly concise, if not slightly lengthy, but concise description of this item. So are there any board discussion on this? Yes, Vice President Steidel.
So if I understand this correctly, we're changing the policy, our district code to just define non-residential, but we're not taking this related to residential and codifying it.
That's correct. The codification simply indicates that the policy will be adopted by resolution. The residential policy.
So it will not be, I guess what I'm asking is, it means then it will not be part of the district code? It will reside as a document outside of that?
The only part of the code will say the residential policy is adopted separately by resolution. That's the only reference that will be there. There will still be a reference to residential. It will just say, as you can see, it'll say, residential accounts will be handled in accordance with the district's policy on the discontinuance of residential water services, which will be adopted by resolution of the board of directors, and as the same may be amended from time to time. That's the only reference to it in the code.
So this indicates also that the resolution is out on the website.
Right. This has to be posted on the website.
Right. So the only way that people know what the policy is, although it is not yet a written policy, is what is going to go out on the website initially, and then it needs to exist as a written policy, and it will never be embedded within the district code.
That's correct. We wanted maximum flexibility because there's going to be modifications to this through the years. So we didn't want to have to go through the ordinance process, which is actually, as you know, 2 readings and then a 30-day waiting period. In order to effectuate changes every time, we'd have to change it. This is kind of how it's being done throughout the communities.
You mean in other districts or?
Districts and cities. We just did it in Arroyo Grande on Tuesday this week.
Did you? Okay. Yeah, I guess I just have a natural inclination to want to know. I mean, if we've got district code, I've got a natural inclination to want to know what the code is and where it is and to go to it. And it can be extremely frustrating for someone who's trying to understand the process to go to something and have it say, well, it's, it's a resolution and it's someplace else, and go to the website. And I understand the flexibility point, and I understand all of those elements to it, but I'm of two minds about it also, in terms of having everything in one place as a point of reference.
I don't know if you've looked at the policy, but it's very long and very detailed, and we kind of try to avoid inserting those into our municipal
Into a
code.
district code.
And I'd recommend against it, but of course, if that's the direction you want to take, we'll retool this thing so that it's part of the code.
Well, I mean, I can certainly, I'm certainly willing to consider that this is just an aversion on my part, and it's, the idea of trying to embed that into the code is, creates more issues than what I'm expressing by having everything in one place.
Thank you. Director Howell.
So there's some issues on the wording of the resolution itself.
What page are you on?
I'm sorry. Starting on page, it's Exhibit A to the Resolution 45, 2019, and I'm starting on page 26. So I guess the question is, there are some issues there where I have questions about some of the wording, which to me seems somewhat unclear. Is this something that we need to deal with now, or can we adopt the resolution as is and then change it later?
I'd recommend that you do it now.
Well, let me just call forth these items then. I'm sorry to take the time, but when we say that an account, this is 4A on page 26, when we say that an account has been delinquent for at least 60 days, I think there needs to be a definition of when an account starts to become delinquent. I think it probably needs to be in there, although, I mean, this is just my own thinking in that. Going on to the next 6A sub paragraph 2 on page 27, it appears to me that...
Can I just take these one by one?
Oh, sure, you can do that.
The delinquencies are called out in the code.
As to when it is delinquent?
Yes.
Okay, good, as long as it's somewhere, but it wasn't there, so it's concerned. Okay, now going to 6A subparagraph 2, about midway through the paragraph where it speaks about a member of a customer's household is a current recipient of CalWorks, et cetera. Again, it seems to me it's possible that household needs to be a little better defined, because I could envision a situation where you have one member who is on some kind of disability and assistance, and yet the household does have an income level that is such that, so this seems to be a little bit of an inconsistency there.
It's taken verbatim out of the statute.
Doesn't mean it shouldn't be changed.
No, it doesn't, but it'll certainly be burdened if we start defining them.
Okay, well, that is an issue. Similarly, and this may again just be a problem with the statute, the same where we say the customer declares that the household income is less than 200%. Are we not to ask for any proof of that?
That's up to how we administer this provision. We will certainly ask for proof of it.
Okay, but all right, good. Just wanted to make sure that these are covered. On C, page 28. The only thing there is I make an observation that in the next budget process, we're going to need a budget item, a line item for, because we have, if we're going to be offering that kind of assistance, it says reduction can be funded with property tax revenues that the board has approved and transferred to the water fund budget. That needs to be something that needs to be brought forth in the next, this is just a comment to the finance committee. Okay, moving on.
And Pam indicates we already have that in the budget.
Yes, that's already been.
That is in the budget? Oh, good, thank you. D, subparagraph 2 on that same page, speaking about not paying current residential water service charges for 60 days or more, but it doesn't say when that 60 days starts. You see where I am on that?
Would it
I'm
be-
sorry. Okay, page 28, paragraph D, subparagraph 2, and it's the last sentence. when it says.
It depends on the agreement date. That'll be defined in the agreement.
Oh, good, okay. Again, just not seeing that these things are laid out. Okay, that, you've already answered one of my other questions. Okay, there is, I find it problematic on, we may want to look at the wording on the next page, section 8. There seems to be some disparity between paragraph A and paragraph B. It's a little hard for me to describe. What I'm not seeing is how in paragraph B, where we speak about I don't see how paragraph B applies if the accounts are individually metered. Because if they're individually metered, then they can be individually turned off. So I'm not quite sure what the intent of that paragraph actually, I just find it confusing.
How do you want to modify it?
I don't know. But do you see the problem I'm having with it, though? I mean, and this may not be the appropriate venue. We can address this later if it becomes an issue. But I do think that it really needs to be looked at.
Not that I want to repeat this, nor does it mean anything, but that's verbatim out of the statute.
No, that's good. Okay. There are always sometimes mistakes in the statutes. I do think, however, there is one thing missing, which is in the statute, is that in the statute there is a provision for the tenant customer to deduct the water charges from the rent if the water charges were included in the rent. That was specific wording in the statute. Probably needs to be included here at this point because it's not here. No? Okay.
Just tell me where you want to insert it.
I'd insert it probably in this, perhaps as another paragraph, C or something.
I'm sorry?
I would insert another paragraph on this section.
At the end of B?
Yeah, at the end of B.
What's the exact wording you want?
The wording, you can take it from the statute. There's a provision in the statute for if the tenant is normally in their rent paying for the water and they become a customer, they are permitted, shall be permitted, to deduct their water, the amount they're paying to the water from their rent. And I think that needs to be explicitly laid out. It is in the code, is in the statute.
I interpret that as an agreement with their landlord. So we have tenant customers and we have residential customers. We don't offer reducing bills and refunding people because the landlord pays it and the tenant offsets it. That's kind of a relationship between the landlord and the tenant.
That's not really what
Not
I'm
our
talking
relationship.
about. This is a different situation where the landlord is delinquent and the tenant is given the opportunity to become a customer. So the tenant does then not pay the landlord's arrears. The tenant starts fresh at that point. And if there was a prior agreement between the tenant and the landlord that the rent covers the water, then that tenant now is permitted to deduct his or her water charges from the rent. It's a different situation when the tenant elects to become a customer.
Well, I don't have the statute with me, so we'll have to continue this item to our next meeting, which may cause some problems because it won't be effective by February 1st.
We could leave it as it is, but we can then come back and amend it.
The reality of it is, if it's in the state law, it's available to them. It's just not articulated clearly in this code.
Okay.
Again, we can adopt it now and perhaps amend it when we bring this back, because we certainly will. Or we can continue this thing, take it off calendar and do it on the next.
No, I would prefer that we, the main thing, that was why I started the discussion, is can we modify this after we adopt it?
Oh, of course.
The answer is yes. So I have these problems with it, but there's no reason not to adopt it as is.
Okay. And
Sorry
again,
to
if you can get these to me before the meeting, we can, as we've discussed before, we can get all this in and speed up the
Absolutely.
process substantially.
Yeah, sorry about that, yes.
Yes, Director Rice.
I'm kind of in agreement with Vice President Stidel on this, that because it's based on a state law, we should put it into ordinance, and I base that not just on her comments, but my understanding of reading through the law that we are required to be putting into place so that we're not out of compliance with the state. But also because I know that at least one citizen, I believe her name is Dr. Elizabeth Bettenhausen, has requested prior resolutions from the district staff, and pulling all together all the resolutions has not been a simple matter from my understanding when we want to just kind of look at it all at once, and therefore having it be as part of the ordinance. Because when I go and look what are the rules, that's where I expect to find them. I don't want to have to go 18 other places, and I do kind of agree with Director Steidel. And if the state law changes and makes water districts take another tack, then we have to amend the ordinance, which is a more involved, potentially more expensive because it's more involved process, but it is also a much more clear, it's all in one place, and we don't have to figure out which resolution is actually the one that that applies. It is, and I also think that it's important here to look at from the perspective of policy and what is it that we're trying to accomplish here. It is up to the staff how things are administered, but it's up to us to make sure that it's speaking the right thing for the district and what our position is in general on this, which to me speaks to, there's a few spots in here, like I don't know which parts are absolutely required by state law. Well, let me start with this question, because I have a lot of different questions, but if we fail to approve either by resolution or ordinance changes to our current policy, does state law then take over at whatever the state is, or what's the result of that situation?
We're required to adopt the policy pursuant to that state law.
Adopt that policy doesn't necessarily mean adopting the ordinance. Can we, is there another approach forward?
Well, we have inconsistent provisions in our code, so we have to amend our code one way or another.
Okay.
The way we chose to do that is, as you see, is what you're now talking about.
So, although this is, it's accomplished in step functions, and so it may seem a little convoluted, but in order to meet the requirement, can we move forward with the revision to the ordinance, because we do need to segregate the residential and the non-residential? So I think the language in terms of the district code and resolving that, and then adopting this with the understanding that what we will be doing in a timely manner is moving what this resolution represents to a code position and codifying it. So we basically are doing it in a step function. It resolves meeting the deadline date. It changes the existing district code as needed, and we're going to burden ourselves with making sure that we also codify it within our district code moving forward.
So you mean take the actions that are recommended today and then at some future date plug the whole policy into the code?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. That solves,
Does that work
solves the problem.
Okay.
One of my other questions has to do with non-residential accounts and delinquent. I'm assuming that we have some sort of policy on non-residential. And I know it wasn't addressed in the state law, that the state law only addresses the residential. So does that mean that we're not going to move the non-residential in line with what the process is if somebody's delinquent for non-residential?
We're going to continue to utilize the process that we have on our code for non-residential. So if you look at the ordinance, if you look at, say, section 2 of the ordinance, 4.04.080, it's verbatim. The ordinance is verbatim for the first two paragraphs until you get to the last sentence. That's the only change. With the change is residential accounts will be handled in accordance with the district's policy. That's the only change. So the process that we now use for non-residential will stay in place. Codified.
Okay, so here's a couple of the considerations that are going through my head right now. One of the considerations is, I don't know how different it is for residential versus non-residential in terms of the impact, both penalty-wise and how, the shut-off fee and all of that stuff, and whether or not it's important for businesses to have access to the new rules that the state has told us that we need to adopt. And if at some point this board decides to take up the question of whether vacation rentals that are licensed are a business or not, that then could complicate the issue of residential versus non-residential, because if we determine that vacation rentals that are for that purpose are non-residential, and that's a whole nother ball of wax I don't want to get into further than raising the issue that it's something that the board has in the past considered whether that's something we wanted to do, and we never got to the discussion.
It would appear to me that even though in the sense that people are using it to obtain money, so as a business in that regard, the property is not changed as being residential. Where with businesses, those are defined as something other than residential. So I think it actually defaults to how the property itself is viewed rather than the idea of using business and residential. That would be my take on it.
I'm just raising it as something that we might want to keep in mind if we go forward on that, because I think that could possibly be a policy question we might want to address when we're looking at the overall availability of housing in the community. Licensed vacation rentals being residential, right now they're under these new rules, which is totally fine with me. I frankly think that we should put everybody under the same rules because it creates more work for staff if you got one set of checklists for one and one for the other. Also, just as a non-attorney and who likes reading these kinds of things, it might be nice for the people in the community to have a simple, this is the step, this is what you can expect if you have a delinquent bill. You're going to have to go into the office, this is the 15 days, 60 days, but not have it be in all of this complexity, It also probably would help in training staff on new rules to have that kind of, just brief kind of, but.
I think there's a desk procedure that would have to evolve out of it, just as a process
right,
thing.
And that's on the staff. That's on the staff side of it.
Right, outside of what we're considering right now.
But to have two separate ones and then have to figure out which one you're dealing with sometimes, because some of the businesses might, or maybe I'm wrong, but maybe some of the businesses are in individual person's name.
Oh, they'd be in a DBA if nothing else.
Yeah.
Or it could have a code on it, probably, I would guess. I'm okay with the approach that Cindy's suggested, that we go forward so that we are in compliance with the state law. But I also know that once things get passed, everybody forgets about it, and we never come back to it. And this might be something that could be folded into looking at the low income if we're going to change those policies or other things that are within the code that are closely related, like a low-income policy.
Okay, so should we add this to the ad hoc committee on the low income people that we
The
need to
affordable
look at?
housing, you mean?
No. This is the other one.
Oh,
This is
okay.
low
Okay.
income water rates, ad hoc. We add, looking at this particular item to see if we want to what they're doing is they're basically giving the residential people more time, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know whether we want to give the businesses any more time. I think we keep them tightened up as it is. But again, I agree that there needs to be even a insert into the next bill that explains the new law. If we haven't done that already, we need to do that so that all of our customers have an understanding. And we need to send that out to both businesses and residential so that they know what the difference is. Okay, so which rules are they operating on? But for today, okay, let's assign that to the ad hoc committee, okay, for them to start looking at this area of our code and getting it back to us no later than March, okay? And then at the same time, let's go ahead and pass this resolution so that we can move forward with the state law.
That works for me.
All right, so
Go right ahead, Director Pearson.
I move that we adopt resolution number 45, 2019, a resolution of the Board of Directors of Cambria Community Service District establishing a policy on the discontinuation of residential water service in compliance with the Water Shutoff Protection Act, California Health and Safety Code, Section 116900, et cetera.
And I will second.
Yes, Director Rice.
Is that with the suggested changes that Director Howell raised, or is that something that you're going to address later because we're going to get this passed? I just want to make sure.
Director Howell is on that ad hoc committee.
Yeah,
So.
that's lucky me, right? So, I think though in the motion, if I might suggest that we add an amendment to, otherwise I'm afraid some of this is going to get forgotten, the issue that we wish to, what was the wording that Director Steidel, you used? Codifying, and is what I hear was kind of backfilling. What's the word? You said, you had an excellent choice of words. Does anyone remember what they were?
Well, it was a matter of then taking
the
the resolution and codifying it within the district code.
Okay, yeah, so can we include some kind of wording to that effect, that is our intent?
Well, it would either be that or take an action item and have it recorded for.
I just wanted to get it memorialized.
Memorialized.
Yeah, maybe as a separate motion or something. Let's do it that way then.
Okay.
Separate motion.
Yeah, separate motion.
Separate motion, so I moved. Did anybody second?
I did.
So, Ms. Madrid, it seems like we need to take a roll call vote here.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Steidel?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. Moving on to item.
I think there's another motion.
Another motion.
sorry.
I would move that this item and the resolution and codifying of this resolution be assigned to the ad hoc committee on low income water rates. And they bring it back no later than March to this board for our further discussion.
Let me just ask, Ms. Duffield, does that appear to be possible? Considering how complicated it was from the last time we met and discussed this?
So we have two separate issues going on. We're evaluating if the general fund can backfill the reduction in water rates, because if we reduce water rates or sewer rates, we're required to not have that subsidized through the current customers that can pay their water rates in full. So any type of rate reduction impacts property taxes, which is our biggest source of income from the general fund. So that is what we're trying to evaluate on if we reduce water rates at the same rate we're reducing sewer rates, what that impact would be.
But this motion is just on
That sits
the
outside of
delinquent
that.
bills that's
Right.
outside of that, so it's a secondary task for that ad hoc committee, it sounds like to me, based on the motion.
Yeah, those two need to be
So
separated.
only the secondary part about the delinquent bills is my understanding.
That
Will be
has
back
to
in
be back in March. And
But not the low-income
And-
rate
right.
reduction.
Yeah, that does not have to be done by March, and this codifying and everything will be dealing mostly with Mr. Carmel and not with the finance.
I would second that if you'd be willing to go to April, just for, give them a little bit of extra time. It's
Yes.
only a month.
Yes, April is fine.
So with the modification, April.
Right.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Did you have something else to say, Vice President Steidel?
I didn't know if I needed to, in my second, acknowledge the April date as being.
All right, so could we kind of restate where we're at right now, Ms. Madrid?
Yes. Director Pearson moved to have consideration to codify Resolution 45, 2019 be assigned to the Low-Income Water Rate Ad Hoc Committee and bring it back to the full board in April.
All right. So I think we're ready to take a vote on this. So a roll call, please.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director, oh, which one are we voting on? Did we vote on the first one already?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, Director Rice.
Aye.
Director Howell.
Aye.
Vice President Steidel.
Aye.
President Pearson.
It's not a problem. He's still my cohort to my left here, so.
President Farmer.
Yes, thank you. All right, moving on to
we
the
have-
next item, item
President,
4.
President Farmer, we have one additional action to take.
Oh, pardon me.
That would be to move, to introduce an ordinance amending sections 4.04.080, comma, 4.04.090, and 4.04.100 of the Cambria Community Services District Municipal Code relating to delinquent water bills and waive further reading.
So moved.
Second.
Do we need to take a vote on this also, or are we good? We have to vote, okay.
We need a vote.
So once again, a roll call vote, Ms. Madrid. And thank you, legal counsel, because people wonder, well, does this guy really earn his money? But just reading everything from this particular item, it just made things a little easier, so thank you so much.
Director Rice.
Aye.
Director Pearson.
Aye.
Director Howell.
Aye.
Vice President Steidel.
Aye.
President Farmer.
Aye, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 4C, and I do have a request for two requests for public comment. Actually, yes, 2 requests for public comment on the, 3 requests for public comment. And first is Christine Heinrich, followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Thank you. I asked the board to take some time to discuss and consider assigning a separate individual to act as board secretary as recommended in the CSDA policy handbook. The board and the staff are not identical, and having a separate role for the board secretary would protect both sides. In the current situation, Ms. Madrid is serving as board secretary in her role as district clerk. She's suing the district. This places her in an awkward, if not untenable, position. These unique circumstances illustrate the importance of having a board secretary whose role is clearly defined. The situation is already difficult. Please help us all by making the board secretary role distinct from that of district clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Elizabeth Bettenhausen, followed by Gordon Heinrich.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to say a general statement first about these 4C, 4D, and 4E. I want heartily to commend the Standing Committee on Policy for taking on issues that have been germane to the work of the board for years and years and have usually been subsumed under a discussion of an only semi-pertinent issue in each case. I want to speak in very strong support of what Ms. Heinrichs just said. And I did not know she was going to talk about this, so it's I'm not simply adding something here in a surreptitious fashion. I strongly agree that there must be a distinction between district clerk and secretary of the board, no matter who holds those offices, no matter what the situation is in particular at any given time. There has to be clarity about what the district clerk what authority the district clerk has in relationship to the board and in relationship to the remainder of the staff, no matter who holds the office. Is it a district clerk for the board, or is it a district clerk for the district? Is it a district clerk for the staff? And I must say that even though this is copying what has already been written by another source, I don't find sufficient clarity in 4C to recommend that you adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker on this item, Gordon Heinrich.
Thank you. I was trying to highlight section 1015.1D, where they're talking about preparation and the supervision of the preparation of filings. What I would think would be of value for the district clerk or secretary is there's a will serve request that would be documentations that should be noted for their responsibilities, and that would include remodels, additions, and reconstructions, new constructions using grandfathered males, and then there's vacation rental regulations, and then there's another intent to serve requests, affordable housing program projects, extension for ITS holders, intent to serve, transfers and assignments, which is transfer per Title 8 of CCSD Code 8.04. And that would also include the application for transfer of position forms should be noted to the board so recognition before they're sent out to the clients or who's requesting that information.
I'm a little lost, Mr. Heinrichs, what you're referring to.
Well, it's referring to that the secretary clerk in 1015.1, preparation and supervision of filing.
Oh, I see.
But it doesn't say where the filing goes and what information is requested for that filing. And we seem to have a problem on information getting from staff to the CCSD board and also to the community for what is intent to serve letters and others that I think would fall under that duty. So it's not mentioned here is what I'm asking, is that we need to have that provided to the community and the CCSD board before we find out through the Coastal Commission that something's being permitted that we're not aware of, even though it's not a letter of intent working backwards because they're supposedly not having those done at this time. But there seems to be being so.
Thank you, Mr. Heinrich, and perhaps we can get some clarification during discussion on this item. Yes, Vice President Steidel.
I agree with you, although I don't know that it's a function of the district clerk. I mean, we have that assignment resident within the staff, but it's not the district clerk's action. I do agree that, and I have had discussions amongst board members about the idea of any time there's any kind of, for instance, even the grandfathered meters,
Correct.
where there's not we have legal obligations to provide that, and it isn't a matter that there's a new meter being granted. It's a meter that had already been granted legally. It's just a timing issue, but whenever those come up and whenever those are moving through the staff, I do think that
That's my
a
point.
status of information should be brought forward to the board on a regular basis. For information purposes, I agree, for information to the community and information to the board also. But I don't know whether that's something to embed within the purview of the district clerk.
That's what I'm trying to get between the clerk and the secretary, information that the board should have to be able to be aware of these projects instead of finding out about them later. So you're correct.
But
I agree with
it's
what you're
not
saying. Right. Could be differently.
Excuse me. Excuse me, I'm just realizing that normally we don't have dialogue with
Oh,
someone
I'm
in
sorry.
public
I
comment.
apologize. You're absolutely right.
It's all right.
Sure.
But thank you for your comments, Mr. Heinrich. And by the way, I might have been in error. Perhaps I should have had our general manager introduce this item before we went to public comment. So if I did make that mistake, I'll just move to Mr. Weigold now. Is that correct? And this is item 4C.
Correct. So 4C is actually a policy committee report recommending that the Board of Directors review draft policies 1015, 1020, and 1025 and consider adoption of the same. Those are overview of the district clerk, board staff communication, and claims against the district.
So perhaps we can hand this over to Director Howell right now, who is the chair of the policy committee. See if we have any discussion on his part.
Not having been present when these particular policies were addressed, I would, if Director Rice is willing to discuss this, I'd appreciate it. I think she could give the board a little better.
Director Rice.
Okay, so as when I was chair of the policy committee, the committee decided to go forward with the CSDA policy manual in numerical order, which these are the first policies that came up for discussion, and the committee wanted to bring these forward. I personally am of the opinion, and I wanted them to bring it forward because just my opinion doesn't count. You have to have a majority. That this strays, because we don't have a board secretary, this strays a little too far into the operations that are the responsibility of the general manager. Now, one of the arguments, and I thought it was a great argument, which is one of the reasons why I didn't push harder to not have this particular policy come forward, is, well, what if there's a disaster and the district clerk is no longer, we still have to have somebody who's the communication liaison. If we don't have a GM, if something horrifying happened and we're in an emergency situation, that it might be important for somebody on the board to be the communication liaison for the kinds of things that a district clerk might do. That could be argued that that would also be the president. We can't afford to have a secretary to the board. We just can't. And no matter who's in the clerk position, whether it's Ms. Madrid, who's done a job for a very long time and knows a lot about how to do it and knows a lot of what her role is, or somebody else, like a prior district clerk. I mean, there's all kinds of, I think that it's going beyond the scope of what a policy should be for the board, because it's a board policy that speaks to having a secretary to keep track of these things. Now, some of the issues raised by Mr. Heinrichs, I also agree with. Communications between staff and the board can sometimes be troubling, but we don't need to lay that on top of the district clerk. That's a job for the GM, and it's a job for when members of the public come up and say, hey, somebody told me this, you're not getting your letters or whatever, then that's something we need to address with the GM. And I personally feel like this particular policy oversteps the importance of having operations be under the GM and not. And we don't define the job descriptions, we approve them. We don't define the salary schedules, we approve them or disapprove them, modify them as they're brought forward. I don't think that this particular policy serves either the staff or the board, and all policies should always serve the board and the organization. And this one, to me, doesn't do that, this particular one. The other ones, I think, have good merit. I don't know anything about claims against the district, and using whatever the CSDA standard manual, as long as it's been looked at by Mr. Carmel, I'm okay with that. On the board staff communication, really, really wordy. We could do without the role of the board paragraph, but I think there's some really good things in here if we take that one paragraph out the role of the board. I'm on page 33. There's a section called Role of the Board. There's a couple good sentences in there that maybe we don't want to lose entirely, but the rest of it I think is pretty darn good. I would just say to have all written information material that could be emailed. I don't want it to be paper bound. Like if I ask this policy includes a thing that says, if I ask the general manager for information XYZ, then he's supposed to send it to all the directors and not just to me. And I think that that's a smart policy. I just want to make sure that it's clear that if it's a written something or other, because we don't need him to be recording all his phone calls and then sending it to all the directors. That could create a Brown Act problem for one thing. But written communications when he's answering questions, I think that's a really important policy to have in place, and I 100% support that. This extra wordiness is, the more words you have, the more confusing it is to try and implement a policy. It's the bottom line for me on this.
So you're suggesting that we kind of downsize this particular policy item?
I think we could pass it as it is because it has some important provisions relating to making sure that all board members are informed when a director asks about something, that it's sent out to all the directors. That we've also, under prior general managers, and I'm hoping we're not going to have this issue, things were CC'd to the board that were never received by the board. And those are the kinds of things that a district clerk, the actual position of district clerk that Ms. Madrid is in right now, is responsible for making sure those things come forward, and the GM is responsible for, if it doesn't, then, that's his job to deal with that's not happening. Prior GMs didn't take the position that was anything wrong with that. I don't think that that's really an issue, but if it's not an issue, that doesn't mean we don't need a policy, because eventually it could become an issue.
Director Pearson?
First of all, I'd like to thank the policy committee members who worked on these and got them in front of us. Second, I agree on the district clerk. I think it's not needed. It's part of the general manager's job to have a job description for the district clerk and move forward from there. The other two policies I think are fine. I think they're a little wordy, but at the same time, as long as Mr. Carmel has reviewed the claims against the district one, which he has, then I would move to adopt policy 1020 and policy 1025 as written from the policy committee.
And did you?
Second.
So excuse me, just for clarification, since you just said that for 1020 and 1025, what about 1015 once again?
I don't think we need it.
Don't need
Okay.
It's superfluous.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
It was Director Pearson and Director Rice. So if we could have a roll call, please.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Stidell?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. Before we move on to item 4D, I note by the clock on the wall that we're getting close to 5 o'clock, so we're obviously going to move past that and then some. So do I hear a motion to at least move to extend the meeting to 5:30?
So move.
Second.
All right. How about a quick roll call vote there, Ms. Madrid?
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Vice President Stidell?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye, thank you. So item 4D, I would imagine Director Howell will be addressing this once again, but General Manager Weigold, if you would introduce this item, please.
Yes, Mr. President, agenda number 4D is Policy Committee recommends the Board of Directors review draft policies 1030, 1035, and 1040 and consider adoption of the same. Those Items are the Code of Ethics, Conflict of Interest, and correspondence to the board.
All right, thank you. We do have one request to speak on this item. Gordon Heinrich? I guess I should make note that Mr. Heinrich is the vice chair of the policy committee. Thank you.
Gordon Heinrichs here. We have concerns with these codes in what they're written for throughout the state that do not necessarily include all the premier activities that are going on in Cambria and the Losa district. I'm referring to on this one the 1030.6, the codes and guidelines for environmentally sensitive habitat areas, including coastal commissions, activities, and responses to our activities. And there's a list that of several organizations that in the code of ethics, that sometimes when you're agreeing to those things, that you may not be aware of all those things you're agreeing to. And what I would like to point out here is that the implement of the San Luis Obispo County General Plan, San Luis Obispo County Local Coastal Program, and Guide to Management for the future growth of the country or county in accordance with those plans, to regulate land use in a manner that will encourage and support orderly development, beneficial use of land within the county, to minimize adverse effects of the public resulting from inappropriate creation, location, use, or design of buildings, sites, buildings, land uses, parking areas, and other forms of land development by providing appropriate standards for the development, and to protect and enhance the significant natural, historic, archaeological, and scenic resources within the county as identified by the county general plan, to assist the public in identifying and understanding regulations affecting the development and use of land. And then the local coastal program, LPC policies, such as the NCAP Planning Area Standard 4, Coastal Watersheds, Policies 1 and 2, ESHA Policies 2, 7, 20, NCAP Planning Area Standard 4A requires that development ensures no adverse impacts to Santa Rosa and San Simeon Creeks. Coastal Watershed Policy 1 provides that the long-term integrity of groundwater basins within the coastal design flows are maintained to ensure the quality of coastal waters, wetlands, and streams is sufficient to provide optimum populations for marine organisms. Yes?
Excuse me, Mr. Heinrich, I'm sorry. I neglected to turn your timer on.
So I'll be about done when it's done. I'm with the I'm with the policy committee, so therefore that may not apply specifically to me, since this is a policy question. And what I'm relating to is the codes and ethics that relate to the codes of ethics as a policy that are not written in our codes because it's taken an assumption that everybody's everyday of life is being considered in each other city. This is throughout California. Here in Cambria, it's a question of coastal commissions, regulations that we are overlooking sometimes for the betterment of the community.
President Farmer, question.
So,
I'm wondering whether the presenter is intending to offer these as revisions to the policy that's being brought to us without it having been reviewed and approved by the policy committee.
Or just having it in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to find what you were stating.
We
but
don't even
perhaps,
have it for reference.
Yeah, if I could just ask this of Director Howell, who is the chair of the policy committee, could you kind of clarify what, and this is no reflection on Mr. Heinrich, of course, but if you could kind of clarify what direction we're trying to go in at this time with his statements?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Actually, what Vice Chairman Heinrichs has been talking about is an addition to what we have here, and that is, in fact, on our list of future agenda issues. What, if I may just direct you, though, to 1030.5, the paragraph H. It's really an expanding of that, the meaning of that paragraph. As you see, it says, we will be conservators working toward responsible use. So what we have on our, at some point in a future agenda is to discuss an additional policy that expands upon that, which I think is what, if I may put words in your mouth,
That's
I
correct.
think that's what
It's-
you're advocating is that.
What it was 6A and 6B.
So this is not currently before us because we haven't, the policy committee hasn't actually, it's been put forward, but hasn't been yet discussed. That's, at least that's the way I'm.
Correct. We discussed it in the policy committee meeting, and Mr. Weigard was at that meeting, and he suggested this might be called an environmental edition separately.
Yeah.
But being separately, I'm still mentioning this code of ethics, which wasn't an intent for people that are agreeing to the code that I'm suggesting should include these items.
So if I can, yeah. So,
Anyway, that's
yeah.
what the thought was. So if this is the wrong place, we'll wait till it comes back up again.
Yes, I have a feeling that Vice President Stidel is going to say the same thing I am, so go right ahead.
Well, I'm just suggesting that when something's being brought before the board, it has to carry the gravitas as having been approved by the committee that's bringing it forward, and that appears not yet to be the case. It's something under consideration. So I appreciate the fact that there's information you wanted to provide to us, but what we're required to do right now is to try to vote on these policies. And I think that we just need to address ourselves for what we have in front of us to vote on.
That's correct. We'll get the second opportunity to give you this upgrade of this code of ethics that you should be aware of under the environmental section then. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may then, I think what we were hearing is sort of an introduction to the topic which we can expect to come in front of us at some future time.
Well, it's not part
But it's not part of what is
of
before
this
us.
agenda
Right.
item, and
Yeah.
so, yeah.
No, you were, yeah, thank you.
All right, so do we have any board discussion or further board discussion on this particular group of items here? Yes, Director Rice.
Again, I'm very appreciative of the work that the policy committee has done under having very little direction other than the CSDA manual and what they can find in our documents at the district. The code of ethics is excellent. However, I would like an opportunity as a board member to have a deeper discussion, because this is speaking to core values that the district has. And I think it's a kind of thing that we could be doing at a town hall or strategic planning, something or other, because I think it's important. It does set the tone. It is a rather big, broad subject that sets the tone for how the district does business. And whether or not we're good stewards of the environment, I don't think it should be number H. I think it should be higher up on the list, personally. And having that discussion with the rest of the board and having staff hear those priorities, I think might be a useful thing for us to do. And based on, I mean, I'm okay with approving these policies as they're brought forward. However, because this also says that I'm going to adhere to these things, I really would like to have a fuller discussion, because it'll also help me get to know my fellow board members better and what their values and priorities are within these values. And so that would be my recommendation for 10:30, that we push this to a public meeting where the board can have, that's a less formal, but still a public meeting that allows for the board to have some discussion about what these values are, because that is our job as a board, is to set the values and the objectives and the policies of the district, so that we're, this is the map we're on. Let's make sure we're all on the same one.
If I could just make a comment, and we've mentioned before the quality of this board in some ways is, how could we say it, a bit better than in years past, but there's still a number of people out there in the community that are questioning how well this board and how well this district is functioning. And I think your point that you're making with regard to having a town hall meeting on these particular items regarding codes of ethics and core values would probably be invaluable to, once again, developing more trust between the board, staff, the district, and the community. So thank you for that. Did you wish to say anything further, Director Rice?
Just that again, this is asking for the district to follow a certain set of ethics and values that are above and beyond what's the base requirement is. And I'm glad that you have the same feeling on this, that it needs to be a public. If we were to just, no offense to the work of the policy committee at all, but if we were to just rubber stamp what they brought us without having a fuller discussion, then I think that reduces what the community might think of us in terms of our level of involvement and participation and integrity in what we're trying to get done.
Right. So I think what you're saying is that we should approve this with the understanding that in a couple of months, let's say, we have a town hall forum to seriously address, especially policy item 1030. Is that am I correct there?
May I?
Yes, Director Howell.
I think what I'm hearing is that if we adopt this, especially when we do look at 1030.5, where we are actually saying we believe these things, and I think this is what Mr. Heinrichs is actually bringing forth, is that if we're going to say that we believe these things, we better be very clear about what it is that we believe and what we're going to do about it. So I think, if I may make a motion on this, I move that the discussion of this particular policy be postponed until, I'd like to postpone to a time certain, though, where we at least discuss postponing it again. So I'd like to postpone it to our, when's a good time? To our first January meeting, to bring this up again on the agenda, at which point we might, now this is not part of the motion, so basically I move that we postpone this until our January meeting, one of our January meetings. Okay, that's the motion, and I'll defend it after we, is there a second, I guess? And then
I second.
Okay. Now I'll say why I think we should do it this way. So, because this is an important thing, and we do need to discuss it separately. And I think we can thank the policy, then again, this is during Amanda's, Director Rice's tenure as chairman of that committee, that to thank them for bringing this forward to us. Because this is important. So I think suggest that we do that, and then I might suggest that we address the other two policies separately.
Clarifying question. So moving it to the January meeting to actually have that discussion, or do we want to put an agenda item on that's about setting a town hall?
We'll make that part of the, okay, add that to the motion then.
You know what I'm saying, so that it's
Yeah.
more clear what we're bringing it back for, because I don't think any of us
Yeah.
thinks there's enough
Bringing it
time
back
in a
to-
regular meeting.
Bringing it back
have
to
this.
establish whether we're going to do a town hall or how we're going to deal with
How
it
we're
at that
gonna
point.
approach it.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes, definitely. And I think the policy committee appreciates that, that we're really taking this seriously and what they brought before us here.
Ms. Madrid, did you get the revised motion so that we're clear on what we're going to vote on?
Would you like me to read it back?
Please.
Okay. Director Howe moved to postpone policy 1030 to the first January meeting and include how to approach it, whether it would be with a town hall meeting or something else.
Or something else?
To how we're going to address the issue of that policy, 1030, right? I think David had the great wording on it, so I think we're clear on what it is that's coming back in January, yes?
I believe so. If I could just add a couple of little anecdotes here. I mean, we've taken enough time so far in this meeting. With regard to core values, which is something I believe that people in the community often wonder about our district. So I just wanted to comment on a couple of things that have happened very recently with regard to my personal experience, me hearing about personal experiences. So I was leaving the office one day, and there was a woman walking up toward me, and I said, it looks like you're going to pay your water bill. And she explained to me that she was a single woman with 3 children, and she was like very busy, and a couple of times she had been delinquent on her bill, you know, paying her bill because she's just like so overwhelmed, as you could understand. And I'm sorry that Ms. Duffield, finance officer, she just walked out like a minute ago because this is a person that works under here, this new employee, Miriam Orozco. And so it turns out that Ms. Orozco has taken it upon herself, you know, on her own time, to be aware of folks that for whatever personal circumstances, they're falling a little behind in getting in there and paying their bill. She's calling them on the phone to remind them that you need to come in, and even folks that she knows might be coming a little bit late, she just calls to remind them that, you know, your bill is due in a couple of days and don't forget to come in, and we don't want to create any problem, that type of thing. So that's number one. Number two, last night, my neighbor, who happens to be a pet sitter, she was over at one of her clients' homes. She got over there. It's a little after 8 o'clock to take care of a pet. The owners aren't there. They're out of town. And she noticed that the water line was leaking outside between the house and the street. So she called the district number, actually got a human being to talk to, told her what the problem was, and 10 minutes later, Adam Lyman was out there. Pardon me?
Steventon. Adam
Stevenson. Okay, well, I might have the person wrong then. Andrew Lyman was one of those two. Okay, one of those two was out there and fixed the problem right there. I just wanted to throw that in because it felt like we kind of needed a little break. And it was something that was both of those were really heartwarming to me with regard to staff. So with regard to, I guess we're now, so we have approved, need to vote on the 2 items, 1035 and 1040.
We didn't take a vote on the prior motion yet of 1030.
Okay, my apologies. So we need to make a motion on that?
We have the motion.
We have the
we just
motion.
have to vote.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, after 3 hours of my first time serving as president, my apologies for not being totally on top of things. So can we have a roll call, Ms. Madrid?
Director Pearson? Aye. Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Vice President Stidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. So I believe,
So do we want a motion on the conflict of interest and the correspondence to the board? I'll make a motion that we adopt both of those as written.
President Farmer, I do have a minor modification. I made a mistake. I often do. I had stricken the reference to Resolution 03-2019, a sentence that said Resolution 03-2019 to the Board of Directors of the CCSD amending the District Conflict of Interest Code approved and adopted February 28, 2019. I took that reference out because we adopt those resolutions biannually or whenever a designated position is added or taken away or a new disclosure category is added. So it's a moving target, so you don't really want to reference that one specifically. But I forgot to strike the sentence afterwards, which references that provision. It says the referenced and incorporated regulation, that's the resolution I struck. So if we could strike that sentence, which is the last sentence of 1035.1, that would make it a lot more clear. And I apologize.
Okay.
So the sentence that says the referenced and incorporated regulation?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, so I amend my motion to take that sentence out of 1035.
yes, Director Rice.
I'm willing to second the motion to pass these two, except that I have two small well, let's see, total of 4 words that I'd like to have added into 1040.1 that add clarity, because I'd like to add after the word, it says all written or electronic correspondence addressed to or CC'd to the board of directors. And at the in the last sentence, board members are not permitted to use agency resources. I think it should say board members and staff, because they shouldn't be using personal, the letterhead for their personal either, right? Because I think we're trying to get an overall district. So I would second with the change to 1035.1 and 1040.1 if those 2 changes are agreeable with the board.
Agreed.
You may want to change the title as well then.
Correspondence.
To the board and staff, because you're now including the staff and
Yeah.
both of them.
Well, thank you for making those needed changes.
Thank you for the correction.
So, question.
Yes, Vice President Stidel.
Just for educational purposes, or to clarify for me, the first sentence where it says addressed to the board of directors is to be sent to the district office. Is that just basically saying that emails should be directed to the directors on their district email addresses, and they should be mailed to the district office attention of individual directors? I'm just trying to understand what that means.
There's also nothing in here about board members responding to correspondence that comes into the board of directors as a whole.
Yeah, okay, so let's not adopt 1040 at all, since there's so many questions about it. And let's just adopt 1035 as modified by taking out that sentence and directing policy 1040 back to the policy committee.
Exactly what we wanted, yes.
That's my new motion.
Second.
Second.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Thank you. And thank you, recently former President Pearson for taking advantage of the situation. So, Ms. Madrid, can we have a roll call, please?
Can I just make a couple of, I want to make some clarifying statements for the policy committee. I think it's important that we look at correspondence that comes to the GM, because sometimes stuff comes into the GM, but it's CC'd to the board or to the clerk of the board, but then it, in the past, had not ever gotten to board members. And then also the issue of responding when there's correspondence that comes to the board in general. Specific board members can answer. If it's only to them, I don't think there's an issue with the responding. But if it's to the board as a whole, which means we all get it, we got to figure out if we're going to send the president to do that job, or if we're going to have somebody like, I don't know, a board secretary elected among the 5 of us to take charge of those responses or something. I mean, we just have to figure out how we're going to do that.
So once again, thank you, Director Rice. So once again, Ms. Madrid, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Stidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. We're now moving on to item 4E. Let me have General Manager Weigold introduce this, and then we have at least one. We have 2 items for public comment here. 2 people wishing to make public comment.
Mr. President, agenda item 4E is a recommendation from the Policy Committee that the board discuss and consider adopting a policy regarding the use of electronic devices during board meetings. And a draft is attached.
All right, thank you. We have two requests to speak. As I said, Christine Heinrichs, followed by Claudia Harmon.
Thank you again. Electronic devices have given us so many advantages. They also bring some pitfalls, and I commend the board for taking this issue under discussion. I urge the board to adopt this policy today with an eye to future modifications as circumstances and digital advances warrant. Public meetings are intended to be exactly that, public. If board members are receiving or sending communication to others during the meeting, those communications are not open to the rest of the meeting participants. That violates the spirit of public meetings, that all those present have the right to hear the discussion. It's not only rude to communicate with others outside the meeting, it's a violation of your mandate as elected representatives to conduct public business in public. You can avoid the appearance of concealing public business by adopting and observing scrupulously the policy on not using devices during public meetings. Focusing on your device during a meeting could be construed as engaging in conversation about an issue with someone not at the meeting, or someone who is not willing to speak his mind to the public. It deprives the public of the opportunity to comment on those points of view. Accessing such communication could be construed as receiving public comment without the benefit of having the citizen in person to address their concerns. Everyone present has the right to hear the discussion. Of course, no one would be browsing the internet or social media during meetings when your full attention to the matters at hand is required. But if you're looking at your device, those attending the meeting or watching it on video might think that. Of course, that would never happen. So make yourselves and your commitment to public access clear by adopting this policy and putting your devices away during meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person to speak is Claudia Harmon.
Excuse me for not being quite prepared with something written, but the meeting that, my first policy meeting was when this item was discussed, and so I was quite green at the time. But personally, I have an issue, and I did bring it up at the policy meeting, that when you have a laptop in front of you and the public cannot see your face, your entire face, you have a wall in front of you. I'm a designer, and if you have a wall in front of you, it's like saying, don't trust me, don't look at me, I'm not, I may not be telling the truth because I'm hiding behind this wall. And it's a subliminal thing, but people do respond to that. And I noticed that Mr. Pearson has a tablet of some sort, so it's a little bit lower. Another person has one that is higher, and when I'm sitting down, I can only see this much of that face. And there's one that's tall over here, but somehow yours is not hiding your face. So it's the ones that hide the face that really kind of bother me. I have to say that I was watching to see what people are doing, and I see people, when people are speaking in public, and they're looking at their tablet or their computer. That is what you can't do. You can't do that during a meeting. You just can't, because you're not listening if you're looking at that. Now, if you need to look at the agenda, why the subject is on, I can understand, but you really don't need to, because the fellow over here just read the agenda item. So you need to be listening, you need to be observing, you need to be making contact with the people in the audience and showing that you are open and that you are transparent. And so it's just my personal opinion about this. So I would agree with Christine. All these things need to be put aside. There's no reason. You can have a paper and a pencil in front of you, you need to write notes. But I know that for a fact that there's people that do communicate with these devices. It's been observed by other people, and it really needs to stop. So, thanks.
Thank you. Would open this up for board discussion, this particular item. Anybody wish to make any comments?
I think that the electronic devices on my laptop, and I'm reading my board agenda, and I'm reading the particulars, and I'm reading the notations that I made to myself that I wanted to ask questions about as we were going through and reviewing information. I'm not trying to communicate secretly with anyone, although you may choose to think that of me, and I can do nothing to dissuade you in that manner. The only thing I can do is assume that my other board members would certainly bring that to anyone's attention who might see it. For instance, yes, and there have been times when Director Pearson was sitting here, or President Pearson was sitting here, you could certainly see what was going on. I apologize that you feel that way, but I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about that. That's a personal opinion, and I doubt that there's anything that I'm going to do to change that. Sometimes there's a need to be able to reference materials or reference notations that you've made about things. That's a very common practice for people in business. It's a very common practice for people who work with data, and it's going to become more and more the case. I think the other thing that gets complicated in terms of the cell phone piece of it is that some people use their cell phones as their laptops, and they in turn are also pulling data up or taking a look at something, or maybe referring back to a piece of information if there's a staff member who is validating a point of information to make sure that they're communicating it appropriately and correctly. So I appreciate the concerns. I appreciate the fact that there are always be people that think there are nefarious things that are happening, but frankly, we can't do anything but track one another and validate that we're operating in an ethical manner. And I think that that if any one of us felt that the other was not behaving in that way, that we would bring it to their attention or bring it attention to the public. So the idea that being distracted or dividing attention on multiple matters isn't again an assumption, and that's part of the language of this that I think maybe needs to be considered. I agree members should strive to give their full attention to the proceedings, but maybe part of that decision making or sound judgment has to do with having information in front of you that you see immediately, or to make reference to information that you had gleaned to add to the conversation. I don't know how to get away from that when we're living in an electronic world and we are using our laptops for the materials that we require to do our job.
Thank you, Vice President Steidel. I see that we're sneaking up here on 5:30, so if someone would entertain a motion to move
I move that we go
6
till
o'clock?
6:15.
6:15. Okay, is that including, that's not including closed session?
Yes.
6:15? Well, boy, I'll tell you, let's hope for that.
I'll
All
second
right,
that.
so thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
How? I think. David.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Vice President Steidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Well, as I've said in the past, aye. But we'll just continue on. If no one minds, I'd like to just make a comment or two on this particular item if I believe Vice President Steidel has finished. There's been times in the past, not with anybody on this board right now, where it was witnessed that people were on their cell phones and texting. And there was a lot of suspicion that took place, not just with the people out here, in the audience, people in the community, but even other fellow board members as to, well, what the heck is going on here? I would say, but these were cell phones and people texting. And it's also been, people have thought recently that there was communication going on even here in this room between staff, where someone was texting and someone was communicating on their pad or computer. Perhaps what we would encourage is that if staff is going to be communicating with one another while they're here in the hall, that be done where someone comes up and to the podium and makes a comment on whatever the pertinent issue is at the time, and that might alleviate any kind of suspicion. With regard to the two members of the board right now that are using their devices here, which are obviously not phones, but an iPad or a computer, they are doing it the more technologically convenient way, whereas opposed to the remaining three of us are using, still using the written information that we've been given here. And I can understand people's skepticism, but once again, the issue around trust here with regard to how the board conducts business, please extend that courtesy to us that until further notice, we are just using for their convenience, that's how they're using their devices, and there's really nothing untoward taking place, and I would hope that would, if someone who feels a little bit suspicious still continues to feel that way, there's nothing we can do about that. But like I said, we're trying to develop as much trust up here as possible with regard to the board, and that's how I feel. Thank you. Anyone wish to make a further comment? Yes, Director Rice.
It's really easy to take this personally. I know the first time I read it, I went, not because I don't think that the community needs to know what I'm communicating during a meeting. If I'm communicating something that has to do with the business before us, they certainly should know what that is. I think what this policy does is it affirms the preferred behavior. A policy, if you break a policy, the punishment is we get a bunch of people coming to the lectern and saying, hey, this is the policy. You guys aren't following your own policy. I don't think it should apply to the staff. I think the staff needs to communicate to get information that the board might be asking for at the last minute. And like, for example, the access to the Veterans Hall schedule for us to be able to schedule that meeting as one example. The fact that this was brought forward and is not within the numerical, and I don't remember the board saying, hey, we need this policy, says to me that maybe one of our core values needs to speak to the transparency and open communication and open meetings issues. If that's a concern that has been raised in this community enough that it's popped up as a policy for us to look at, I think that speaks to let's figure out a way to have that be part of our core values. With that, I would urge us to and do move that we approve the proposed use of electronic devices during board meetings, because I do think it does give us enough leeway where we need to for personal calls and things when it's not board related.
General Manager Weigel, did you wish to make a comment?
I was just going to follow up on Director Rice's comment there. I was the one that actually brought this up on one of my first couple of weeks in the job. Our district council gave me the 1-inch thick Brown Act book, and it was in there that I saw that they recommend districts have a policy on this because it could be inferred that some malfeasance could occur. So it was meant to be very simple to that for the board members, so that they just remember not to conduct business during the meetings. That was the only thing why I raised it in the first place.
Director Steidel, did you wish to make a comment? Excuse me, Vice President Steidel.
No problem. The third paragraph here where it says to communicate secretly with one another, I think goes on is somehow something dark and dirty. And, you know, there are communications that, all kinds of communications that go on. So I think the term secretly is inappropriate for the proposal.
Is there a motion on the floor?
I did move approval.
Is there a second?
I didn't hear one.
I'll second that. Then I want to speak to it and amend the motion as well. Okay, first of all, that paragraph, there's nothing in here in this policy that says that either staff or board members can't be using electronic devices. It's very clear about that. There's things, avoiding appearances is in there. The issue of communicating secretly, however, that paragraph was, I believe, the paragraph that Director Steidel actually, was provided to us at the time at the poly. Well, we can verify. It doesn't matter. That is the issue, however, that has people very hot. And I think we do need to call it out and say, even though it does sound a little strange. But I would actually like to beef that up a little bit further, because there is some concerns here that it should not be directly or through not use electronic devices directly or through intermediaries to communicate secretly with one another. Now, not to you could take the secretly out if you wish, but to communicate with one another, with staff, or with the public. Because one of the areas which I've been getting there's been a lot of concern out there about this, was specifically that last issue where the public and some board members were assumed to be communicating. There's no evidence of that I've been, it's all hearsay. Nevertheless, I don't think it hurts to say this. And then the other thing, I would like to beef it up with that change if the mover would accept that amendment. If not, we'll let it go as it is.
Yeah, personally, I don't have a problem with the word secretly. This is affirming behavior we would prefer to have happen, which means that we shouldn't be communicating outside of other people knowing. I think if you want to address the issue of communicating with the public, you just cross out with one another and you put during a public meeting.
Period. Secretly during a public meeting, period?
Right, period.
Like
then
that.
It doesn't really matter. You're not speaking about
Sure.
board members communicating. I personally think that's the greater threat to the public, because obviously if you're communicating with somebody that's in the public, they can tell anybody that's in the public what they just communicated to you if they want. So, but I think that you solve that issue with secretly during a public meeting. And I agree, it's maybe a heavy-handed word, but I think we want to be clear about what we would like to have happen. I think none of us up here would like to have this secretly thing going on at all, that we don't even have to address it. But unfortunately, that's not where we are, and I think that if you're willing to, I would make the motion changing the third paragraph to say after the word secretly during a public meeting.
I accept that, yes, that sounds fine to me. The other thing, if I may just mention, is this is the other issue which this does not address, but I just want to mention it now. Should it become a problem in the future, one of the areas which raised some of the greatest concerns had to do with people watching the live meeting and communicating, not in this room, but from elsewhere. And so, Mike, I have just a technical question. If that becomes an issue, if it's possible for what's the name of the AGP, if it's possible to introduce a delay, a 15-minute delay in the live broadcast, that would resolve that problem. Yeah. If it ever became an issue. I don't know if it isn't now.
Know that it was an issue?
It's been brought to my attention, and actually, as I say, I don't personally have proof, so this is all hearsay, but there's sufficient issues having to do with particularly certain votes that were being taken, and
By this board?
Yeah, not by this board. There were votes being taken, and there were people who were asserting that, they say, I didn't see it, that there was communication coming to individual board members from outside the meeting as to how to vote on an issue.
I think
So
we didn't
during
How would
the
they-
meeting,
how would they
during the
handle that?
meeting resolves that, I think.
You think so?
During the meeting, I think resolves that. If it's a
Okay.
problem, then the public should bring it to the attention of the GM so that we
Gotcha.
can
Okay.
address it with an investigation that causes, because it is a violation of the Brown Act if you're not, and we need to act within the spirit of the Brown Act, not just the letter, but I think this covers that. There's always going to be conspiracy theorists. I know several myself, so. My motion remains with that one change, that one sentence.
Thank you. I would really prefer that this come back to us, maybe on the consent agenda, we can approve it, but cleaned up and put in the proper format. Can we have that
Yeah.
happen? Because
yes.
now, I don't know where this goes in the book, right?
That's a good point.
This is a draft, very good draft, okay? And I agree with all of what's there. And I think that if it came back in January in a consent agenda,
With
it would
numbered.
fly right through with a proper formatting and numbering.
I have no problem with that amendment.
So it should come back to the
So
policy
wait.
committee to give it a
So I'm
number?
going to withdraw my motion because my motion was to approve. So I'm
sorry.
going to withdraw my motion. So then the motion now is to bring it back in the proper numbering and everything
In January, yeah.
in January.
And we'll put it on the consent agenda.
Okay, so that's,
Because we basically agree with the intent and the verbiage. We just don't, we need it, there's some dashes and stuff in here that don't make any sense too, so.
so let's make a
so
motion.
One of the English people here needs to fix that stuff.
So,
Thank you.
So Director Rice, you were just suggesting making a motion to,
I move that we bring this policy back with it numbered appropriately for where it goes in the manual with the minor language issues that we've just discussed.
So my only question, second that, but my question is, does that then you want the policy committee to send it back to you with a number and
Yeah.
and
We need to
format?
get it numbered,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
all right, do we need a second right here?
Oh, second.
Okay, thank you. So Ms. Madrid, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Vice President Stidell?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. Moving on to the final item before closed session is item 4F. And if you would briefly introduce this item, General Manager Weigold, and then we have 2 requests to speak.
Yes, Mr. President, agenda number 4F is discussion and consideration to fill a vacant seat on the policy committee. Staff is recommending that the board discuss and consider filling a vacant seat on the policy committee due to the recent resignation of John Rohrbaugh. The policy committee recently filled another vacancy on October 10th, 2019, and the applications of the individuals who applied but were not selected are still on file. The board should consider appointing a replacement from the previously submitted applications or provide direction to the staff to begin a new application process.
All right, thank you. And like I said, we have 2 requests to speak. Elizabeth Battenhausen, thank you for staying, Elizabeth, this long, followed by Ms. Karen Dean. And thank you also.
And I am reading this because Ms. Dean had to leave. I'm reading a letter from Mr. Ted Key to you about this issue. Quote, "This letter is to recommend Leslie Richards to fill the vacancy on policy standing, which will be discussed on Thursday, December 12th. Quote, Leslie is the most qualified candidate based on her legal experience, and I have found her attention to historic and other legal data quite acute. She has attended many of our meetings and made very helpful comments as we have considered the policy's rework update. Quote, I realize that she is an outspoken woman. It's one of the things that I like about her after 25 years of educating women to be confident leaders. And that has been difficult for some. Putting her energy and skills to work for the district is in everyone's best interests. It's time to turn the page on the past. Her membership on this committee will provide gender balance, and Cambria will benefit from her strengths moving forward. Thanks, Ted Key." End of quotation. I want to say that I have great respect for Ms. Richards and her expertise. Often I listen to have conversations with her in the back of the room while your meetings are going on. She is very astute, she is very distinctive, and she does one of the best things that Greta Thunberg told us, as I reminded you some months ago already. Please stand outside the box. And this community needs people standing outside the box in order to have a widespread representation of the diversity of perspectives and information in this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if I could just add, you used the word distinctive to describe Ms. Richards. I believe there's a number of people that attend these meetings with regularity and could fulfill that role and that description as well. No, the other one was Karen, and she left. So, do we have any board discussion here on this item? Yes, Director Pearson.
I believe that our bylaws, again, on standing committees, say that we will have to accept new applications, and we will review them and vote on in January to elect a new board member.
And the current applications that are in are still considered valid, right?
Right, unless they pull them.
So if there's so you're saying that we open for applications, but the current people who are Jim Berenger, Leslie Richard, Jerry McKinnon are still considered to be active applications. They don't have to put in a new one.
No, they don't have to put in a new one.
All right, so I'm sure Jerry would be grateful to hear that since he's in the audience right now. So do we, seems like we have a motion in hand here, so we have a motion and a second. Thank you. All right, so Ms. Madrid?
Director Pearson?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Vice President Stidel?
Aye.
President Farmer?
Aye. So we will now, and we do have, let me just do this. We will now adjourn to closed session, and I have two requests to speak on closed session. Christine Heinrich, followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen. Oops.
Thank you. You will discuss evaluating General Manager John Weigold in closed session. He's been here for several months, and this is a good time to offer him feedback on how things are going. Mr. Weigold has helped the district in significant ways. Assuring that the district has backup electrical power for emergencies fills an important gap. I'm grateful that Mr. Weigold has identified problems and solved them. He knows a lot about running a complicated organization. He organized public meetings to help the public understand the emergency water supply project and the coastal development permit process required to operate the plant. However, apparently he is not able to commit himself full-time to the district because he's fulfilling another professional commitment. I'm glad that he has been able to accomplish so much in limited hours. I asked the board to evaluate the amount of time he is able to commit to his responsibilities as general manager and adjust his salary appropriately. He should not be receiving full-time pay for part-time work. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bettenhausen.
Yes, it's now almost 6 o'clock or whatever it is on whichever clock you're looking at. I urge the board, and you know my perspective right here and now, I urge you to postpone your evaluation of the current general manager. You do not have time in your closed session to do anything of substance in that evaluation. And I petition you, I urge you, whatever language I can find, not to do this today because, frankly, I'm pooped, and I can't imagine that you are all feeling full of energy, ready to do careful analysis of your entire closed session agenda. You can tell where I am. So please, take a look at your closed session. You might have to call a special meeting, friends, to give careful deliberation to the issues before you. But I petition the new executive committee, President Farmer and Vice President Stidel, please set up agendas that take into account that human beings are finite. They are not omnipotent. They are not omniscient. And they cannot make speedy decisions no matter how difficult the issue. Please be realistic about the agendas that you set up for this board in the coming days and months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would just say that I don't think anybody anticipated somehow that this meeting would go as long as it has, considering what we did in the first 2 hours. And there's probably varying degrees of clarity existing at this podium, right, or this dais right now. So we will adjourn to closed session, and thank you so much for all of you that stuck around till the very end.
And the closed session is agenda item 6.
Oh, thank you.